Hey Barbara, can't you reconsider? Daniel is still in middle school. To leave him and move abroad. Barbara, the wife of her son, tilted her head slightly and frowned as if troubled. Daniel is plain and slow, and to be honest, it feels like he's not even our child. He seems to get along with you in an odd way, so please take good care of him. It's one thing to speak ill of oneself, but to say such words about her own son, Daniel, it made her tremble with anger. However, those feelings were suppressed, never turning into words, remaining in her heart. Daniel and I watched the car carrying the departing son and his family until it was out of sight, then looked up at the orange tree in the empty garden. As I wondered, Daniel pointed out that there were still a few left. My son Charles and his family had taken many oranges for memories, but a few remained on the branches. From a distance, it was hard to see clearly, but some of the fruit seemed to be slightly damaged. Does that mean they didn't want those oranges? As it got colder with a slight breeze, I suggested to Daniel that we go inside, but he shook his head slightly and turned to me, his face overflowing with tears. Dad and Mom don't want me because I'm slow. It's okay. You don't need to worry. I was furious. I closed my eyes, pondering what to do with this anger, and then pondered some more, firmly resolving to affirm and raise this child positively. My name is Susan. Lately, I've lost my appetite and have been feeling unwell. When I consulted a doctor about my unclear health issues, I was advised to get more nutrition. Even with the vague advice to get more nutrition, I wondered what exactly I should eat, considering going to a steakhouse every day. But that would never be sustainable with any amount of living expenses, so I decided to make balanced meals every day. No, that would be too much hassle to keep up. So, I decided to make it a point to eat the oranges planted in my garden. Honestly, I never really cared for the oranges planted in the yard before. I hadn't paid much attention to them every year. Usually, I left the fruit for the birds to eat or just cleaned up whatever fell to the ground, but this year, after seeing a TV infomercial about easy-to-use pruning shears, I was full of motivation and bought them. Just when I was determined to start picking the oranges, I ended up hurting my back. It was supposed to be easy according to the sales pitch, but apparently not for someone with a bad back. If there's a house in a quiet residential area known for its large orange tree, that would be ours. Our orange tree has years when it bears lots of fruit and years when it doesn't, and this year, the branches are laden with oranges. It's just the year I was determined to eat a lot of them. But what to do with my injured back? Just when I was thinking that, my son and his family came to visit at the perfect time. When I explained the situation to my son, he immediately said, "All right, I'll pick them." And he rushed out to the garden. My son and my grandson, Christopher, were using a long-handled pruning shear to joyfully pick oranges from the branches. "Wow, Christopher! You got a big one!" My son skillfully cut the oranges from the branches and had his son pick them up. As for me, I was sitting by the window overlooking the orange tree, staring at a chessboard with my other grandson, Daniel. Daniel was looking intently at the chess pieces laid out on the board, lost in thought, seemingly oblivious to the noise of Charles and Christopher gathering oranges in the garden. It seems I was so focused that I didn't even hear Charles and Christopher making noise while gathering oranges in the garden. When Christopher, the older brother, quietly placed an orange beside Daniel and then turned to me, he put his index finger to his lips in a gesture for silence. He didn't want to disturb his brother, who was deeply engrossed in the game. That was the kind of kindness Christopher had. "Charles, lunch is ready." "Yeah, thanks. We'll be right there." Perhaps one reason my son and his wife visit my house several times a month is because my husband had passed away early. My son's wife, Barbara, is a down-to-earth woman who naturally takes over the kitchen in our house to prepare lunches for everyone. Daniel and I were invited to join them for the meal, but Daniel remained silent, staring at the chessboard, unwilling to move. When I gently touched Daniel's shoulder, "Huh?" he looked up in surprise, saying, "Grandma, will you play chess with me after lunch?" "Of course. Let's go." Barbara, Charles, and Christopher were enjoying their meal while watching TV, laughing together. The TV featured a special on a high school soccer player belonging to a famous high school, and Charles pointed at the TV, tapping Christopher on the shoulder. "Hey, look, Christopher. The high school you're going to is on TV." Christopher has always been athletically gifted, shining in every game he plays. Daniel took up soccer as well, but wasn't quite as skilled. He couldn't outshine his brother. Barbara looked at Christopher with joy and said, "I heard from a friend that Christopher is quite famous among middle schoolers. He's really good at soccer. It seems his name has even spread to other schools." She looked even happier than Christopher, the subject of the conversation. I couldn't help but clear my throat and glance at Daniel's expression. He looked somewhat lonely, slowly slurping up his pasta one strand at a time. Now that Christopher has a scholarship for soccer in high school, it's Daniel's turn. With a promising brother like Christopher, Daniel will surely improve quickly too. Right. Christopher and Daniel, let's play soccer in the park after lunch. But Charles, isn't Daniel going to continue with chess? Oh, right. You haven't finished yet? I informed Charles that the game was still ongoing. Then, I suggested if they'd like to join us in chess, though playing soccer is also great. Charles and Barbara exchanged glances and started laughing together. You're joking, right? Playing chess by the window on such a sunny day? What an unhealthy hobby. Charles, that's a bit harsh on Susan's only hobby. Both of them seemed to mock me and Daniel, but I didn't want to argue and risk spoiling our family relationship, so I nodded along and started washing up in the kitchen. I peeled the freshly picked oranges, placed them on a plate, and brought them out. Christopher and Daniel started eating them, laughing together. I discreetly approached Charles and tapped him lightly on the head from behind. Hey, you know Daniel isn't much into sports like soccer, right? He enjoys playing chess, so don't say weird things. Did I say something wrong? Charles, seeming neither concerned nor remorseful, took the ball and went to the nearby park with Christopher and Barbara. Left behind, Daniel and I returned to our seats by the window. Sitting in front of the sunlit chessboard, Daniel casually looked up at the orange tree. There are still a lot of oranges left, huh? Yes, do you want some more? Daniel shook his head slightly and then turned his gaze back to the chessboard, refocusing his attention. He has a strong ability to concentrate. At this point, I can't predict how Daniel will grow up, but I have a feeling he'll take a path quite different from his brother Christopher's. And so years passed since then. On a sunny day, Daniel and I were again eating oranges picked from the garden. After Charles finished bringing in few small boxes to my house, he stood by the window with a gentle smile, looking up at the orange tree. Sorry, Mom, please take good care of Daniel. I pondered over how to respond. While caressing the oranges picked from the garden, I sighed. Christopher, having been recognized for his soccer talent at his new high school, was scouted by an overseas club team. I, knowing little about soccer, couldn't grasp the significance of the team that scouted my grandson. But when I heard Charles was ready to quit his job and move abroad, I realized this was a big deal. With assistance promised by the scouting team for their life abroad, Barbara was already excited about the overseas move. Every time we met, she would say, "I'm really interested in foreign cultures." She was already studying the culture of the country through books. I had assumed the whole family would move abroad, but they asked me to raise Daniel alone in my house. Christopher was initially surprised and was opposed to the idea. Think about it, Christopher. Wouldn't Daniel be happier living here with Grandma than in an unfamiliar environment? Don't you think so? But Barbara convinced him by saying so. And today, after moving all of Daniel's belongings into my house, they were set to leave on an afternoon flight. Daniel looked sad as he checked the contents of a cardboard box filled with his clothes. Charles and Christopher, knowing they wouldn't return to this house for a while, picked many oranges from the garden tree as a final memory. As the tree's branches became bare with each orange picked, it started to look naked. Daniel, Grandma might not feel well sometimes, so help her out, okay? And work hard on your studies too. Charles said this to Daniel as he cheerfully bid farewell. Though I knew it was already decided, I couldn't help but pull Barbara aside to a spot away from Christopher and Daniel and started speaking in a low voice. Hey Barbara, can't you reconsider? Daniel is still attending middle school. To leave him and move abroad. Barbara tilted her head slightly and frowned as if troubled. Daniel is plain and slow, and to be honest, it feels like he's not even our child. Since he seems to get along with you in a strange way, please take good care of him. It's one thing to speak ill of oneself, but to say such words about your own son, Daniel, made me tremble with anger. However, those feelings remained pressed deep into my heart, never turning into words. Daniel and I watched the car carrying my departing son and his family until it disappeared from view, then turned to look up at the orange tree in the empty garden. As I wondered about the tree, Daniel spoke and pointed out. There are a few left. Charles and the others had taken many oranges as memories, but a few remained on the branches. From a distance, it was unclear, but some appeared slightly damaged. Does that mean they didn't want those oranges? As the breeze grew colder, I suggested to Daniel that we go inside. He shook his head slightly and turned to me, his face overflowing with tears. Dad and Mom don't want me because I'm slow. It's okay. There's nothing to worry about. I was furious. I closed my eyes, pondering what to do with this anger, then resolved to affirm and nurture this child positively. 9 years have passed since then. Beside the chessboard by the window, I looked up at the orange tree in the garden. The birds know best when the oranges are ripe, pecking at the fruit when it's time. I used this as a cue to start harvesting. Stepping out from the window to the garden, I picked a low-hanging fruit. It was free of insect damage and had a nice color. After the doorbell rang, I called out loudly, "It's open!" To my surprise, I was greeted by an unexpected visitor as heavy footsteps approached. Mom, it's been a while. Where's Daniel? It's really been a long time. What brings you here all of a sudden? Well, I saw Daniel's achievements in the newspaper. Isn't it amazing? Finally, he feels like our son. As I sighed heavily and sat back down in front of the chessboard, Barbara asked, "Where's Daniel?" He's reading a chess magazine in his room. He's a pro now, so try not to disturb him. Since our parting 9 years ago, Daniel and I played chess daily, and he gradually showed his talent, eventually becoming a professional chess player. The journey was tough, but we persevered together. Though he never said it, Daniel might have wanted to prove something to the parents who left him. Recently, Daniel won a major title as a pro chess player, making headlines. I hadn't told Charles or Barbara, but they must have found out and hurried back. Soon, Daniel came out of his room. He had grown taller and more robust over the 9 years, the perfect picture of health. Charles, seeing his son all grown up, said, "It's been a while." Saying this, he put his arm around Daniel's shoulder, and from behind, Barbara also. You've become so admirable. Smiled tenderly, as if completely contented. Now I'm willing to live with you. Now that you're a respectable adult, it's your turn to help out your dad and mom with their lives. I'm apparently not your child, so I have no obligation to help. The conversation sounded almost like a comedy, making me burst out laughing. Charles, tapping Daniel on the shoulder, looked puzzled. It seemed like the words were completely unexpected. The audacity to offer to live together after 9 years was astonishing. What's wrong? Are you being stubborn after this long reunion? You must have been lonely living with Grandma all this time. Don't worry, we'll live together from now on. What are you talking about? Live together? I'm not a child anymore. Why should I live with you? Barbara, pulling Charles away from the frozen embrace, said. What are you saying? We haven't been able to contact Christopher for years, and our life is in shambles. We've been living off Christopher's soccer income, and now we have no savings. What does that have to do with me? After all the effort we put into supporting Christopher's soccer, he suddenly disappeared. We didn't know what to do. It's impossible for us to start working now, and you're the only one we can rely on. If you're looking for Christopher, he's here in this house. Hey, Christopher. At Daniel's casual call, Christopher appeared from the kitchen, wearing a cute cat apron, holding an orange, and skillfully peeling it with a knife. What's up? Christopher, with an innocent expression, surprised Charles and Barbara by being there. Christopher, why are you here? Seems like there's a lot we need to talk about, so just sit down and wait. I'll cut some oranges for us. As Christopher served the oranges on a plate to Charles and Barbara. I prepared coffee for everyone. Christopher began to share that, although he was initially enthusiastic about his soccer career and contract with an overseas club, his experiences abroad gradually sparked an interest in becoming an interpreter. Upon hearing Christopher's dream, Charles, being an interpreter won't earn you as much as a professional soccer player. That's not acceptable. Dismissed it without even listening. Disappointed by his parents, who seemed only to care about the money he could bring in rather than his dreams, Christopher lost interest in soccer. He secretly contacted Daniel and me and returned to our town. Now, he's working at a language school while studying to become an interpreter. After explaining this, Christopher sat up straight and faced Charles and Barbara directly. I'm truly grateful that you took me abroad for soccer. But I've found a dream I want to pursue more than soccer. If you're going to deny that, I'd rather you not be involved in my life. Not be involved? Do you know how much we sacrificed to support your soccer career abroad? He reflected on how much time he had sacrificed as a father to support Christopher's soccer. He passionately explained how much he and Barbara, Christopher's mother, had hoped and expected to make Christopher a top soccer player. Christopher, your dad quit his job to support your soccer. And now, you're giving that up for a job as an interpreter? It's not too late to go back to the club team. Right, that's a good idea. If life gets tough until you succeed in soccer, Daniel can support us. He's a famous chess player now, after all. The conversation seemed somewhat detached from reality. Perhaps even Charles and Barbara realized the absurdity of their words. Despite understanding the unfairness of their situation, fear of not being able to survive without such plans seemed to drive their irrational statements. The reason no one spoke up wasn't because the discussion had concluded, but rather because the end point of the conversation had become unclear. I poured coffee into each of the empty cups. The scent of coffee filled the living room, which was enveloped in silence. Daniel quietly shifted his gaze to the chessboard by the window. After Dad and Mom left for abroad, I played chess almost every day. Left for abroad? That makes us sound like the bad guys. Do you think you would have been happy if you had come with us? You're right. If I had lived with parents like you, I might have lost sight of what I was striving for, just like Christopher did. This provocative stance immediately angered Barbara. She stood up and lunged at Daniel, prompting me to quickly step in front of him to block her. Barbara glared at me and shouted at Daniel. "Move! How dare you speak to your parents like that?" Speak to your parents? It's been 9 years. 9 years! You didn't come back to see Daniel even once in all that time. Can you imagine how long these years have been for him? We are their parents, you know? Can you believe that children wouldn't help their parents? Christopher and Daniel are saying they're abandoning us when we're in trouble. Charles, not wanting to be outdone by Barbara's intensity, stood up to face me as well. Exactly. It's irresponsible not to help when your parents are in trouble. It's a child's duty. You're talking about duty? I mentioned I was feeling a bit unwell 9 years ago, remember? Yet, you chose to ignore that and went abroad. It's shameful to change your tune when it suits you. But that's because... Charles mumbled awkwardly, his gaze darting around, not sure what to do. Christopher approached Daniel with a calm voice and apologized. I'm really sorry for everything. Dad, we've decided we want to cut ties with you and Mom. Can you just leave us alone from now on? Don't joke around. What do you take your parents for? Use us when convenient and discard us when done? You're going to abandon us irresponsibly while we're struggling with our lives? Involuntarily, I found myself shouting. That's not it. My voice might have echoed throughout the quiet neighborhood, possibly heard by the neighbors. But I couldn't worry about the neighbors at such a moment. I grasped Christopher and Daniel's hands firmly in mine. Holding them by my sides, I could feel them trembling slightly. Despite their calm demeanor, they were frightened by their biological parents' sudden visit. I knew I had to express the anger on their behalf. It was time to voice the feelings Christopher and Daniel had harbored towards their parents. It's the adults' job to work for their children, not the other way around. We're the parents. We are a family. After abandoning a young Daniel and selfishly deciding on Christopher's potential, like you have any rights to say that. How are you their family? At my words, Charles's eyes widened in shock, and he reached out to grab my collar. Instinctively, I braced for any potential violence by curling up defensively. However, Daniel quickly stepped in front of me and effortlessly lifted Charles, sending him spinning through the air. And before you know it, Charles was lying on the ground, looking up at Daniel. In a state of shock and lying down, Charles is too astonished to say anything. He probably never imagined that the once frail Daniel could throw him. I won't allow anyone to harm our family. Being completely thrown can make a person feel utterly defeated. Charles, lying on the ground and looked down upon by Daniel, must have felt a deep sense of embarrassment. Barbara rushed to Charles with a worried look, but he got up, saying, "I'm fine." However, the aggression he had shown earlier had vanished. Voices from outside could be heard. It seemed the neighbors had gathered, alerted by the shouting from our house. Charles and Barbara exchanged glances and hurriedly left the house, their departure marked by their pitiful retreat. Their future, after such a humiliating exit, remained unknown. Relying on Christopher's income from soccer, Charles and Barbara had little in the way of qualifications or work experience, making it difficult for them to find decent employment at their age. 2 years later, Christopher successfully became an interpreter. His work took him to various places, keeping him busy. Daniel continued to diligently study and practice chess, striving to master the game. Both brothers excelled in their respective fields. As for me, with my grandchildren grown and independent, I started teaching at a children's chess club, aiming to nurture their interests. Having loved chess since childhood, I had once dreamed of becoming a professional player. Despite joining chess clubs in middle and high school and competing in numerous matches, I recognized my limitations and eventually lost faith in my own talent. Even though friends and family encouraged me, saying I had talent and should keep at it, I lost the ability to believe in myself. Having experienced the pain of not accepting my own immaturity, regretting giving up on my dreams, and feeling a tightness in my chest, I had a strong desire to convey something important to the children in my chess class. After all, I had successfully raised Daniel, an exceptional professional player. Although it's often challenging, I find fulfillment in guiding each child, focusing on their individual hearts and potential. Christopher and Daniel live harmoniously with me, sharing these values. I deeply respect Christopher and Daniel, each thriving and fulfilling their dreams. One day, after a long while, Christopher and Daniel offered to pick oranges in our garden. As I've gotten older, reaching for the high oranges has become more of a chore, so I was grateful for the help. Christopher stretched the pruning shears as high as he could, trying to gather all the oranges for my chess club students. "This is quite the tedious task," I remarked with a smile, solving chess problems by the window. I remembered how I used to challenge Daniel with my own chess problems, but now, as a professional player, he would present me with puzzles and watch amused as I pondered over them. "This one's tough." It's a joyful realization that Daniel, whom I taught chess, has far surpassed me in skill. Hearing laughter, I saw Christopher and Daniel gathering oranges with joy. "Grandma? What's up?" "There's something I've always wondered about every year." Daniel pointed to an orange located at the very top of the tree. "That branch is always out of reach with the pruning shears, so picking from it is forbidden. Shouldn't we pick all of them for your chess students?" I stopped Christopher from fetching a ladder from the shed. "Leaving a few oranges on the tree keeps it from looking completely bare." I chuckled. "Leave that one. It's meant to be left there." I used to look at the remaining oranges after Dad and Mom left us and wonder if I was like those unwanted fruits. Daniel's face showed a hint of sadness. I remained silent, focusing on the chess problem. "Not just for oranges, but there's an old custom of leaving one fruit on the tree instead of picking them all." Daniel came over to me and watched as I pondered over a chess problem he had created. His expression bore the same youthful look as it did back then. "There's an old custom of leaving one fruit on the tree as a token of gratitude and hope for future harvests." Gratitude and hope. Moreover, it's left as food for the birds to help them through the harsh winter. The last remaining orange isn't unwanted, it's actually the most special one. Special. I see, so that's how it was. Daniel whispered softly, and I gently stroked his head. Daniel, who has grown quite a bit, doesn't try to escape from my hands and allows me to continue stroking him without resistance. Well, what to do now? This chess problem presented by such a dear grandchild. It's too difficult for me to understand at all. Maintaining my dignity as a respected chess figure in his eyes was crucial, yet finding the solution seemed impossible in the moment. As I pondered, stroking Daniel's head, I hoped for a way out of this predicament, wishing for more such special moments to continue indefinitely. "I've got a spa reservation today. Walk to the hospital, will you? Come on, get down quickly." If you won't get down by yourself, I'll make you get down." My granddaughter Shirley and I, confused, both feverish and delirious. On a day of heavy snow, we had both come down with a high fever. This was happening in the car, as Jennifer, my son's wife, reluctantly agreed to drive us to the hospital. We couldn't comprehend Jennifer's words and couldn't get up from the car. She must have been displeased with our pitiful state. Jennifer came around to the back seat, dragged me and Shirley out of the car. "Now, the nuisances are gone. Good luck making it to the hospital." Laughing loudly, Jennifer drove away. Mom, did she really just abandon us? Even in such a moment, Shirley still saw her as her mother. Shirley had been harassed by Jennifer even before this incident. She hid all the harassment from us adults, always trying to act strong. But when you're sick, your true feelings can show. Feverish and delirious, tears in her eyes, Shirley watched the car drive away. We had been enduring Jennifer's harassment for a while, but this was the last straw. From the hospital phone, I managed to call someone for help. "I'm Carol. I retired last year and now work part-time, a 60-year-old housewife. Until 6 months ago, I lived in a small detached house with my husband. However, he suddenly passed away due to illness. It was just 2 months after the illness was discovered. The suddenness of it all made it hard for both my son Edward and me to accept reality. I had been with my husband since we were in junior high. It felt like our hearts and bodies were in the same state. Right after he passed, I couldn't even eat. Sorting through his belongings at home, I couldn't stop crying and barely made any progress. Edward would occasionally come to the house to support me. Gradually accepting reality and finishing the home organization, Edward suggested I live with him. But Jennifer is there, so I'll refrain. Edward got married around the age of 30. His wife, Jennifer, a housewife 2 years younger than him, approached him at their workplace. Won over by her passionate pursuit, Edward, after about 6 months of dating, quickly married her. After marrying and retiring, Jennifer was blessed with a child and gave birth to their daughter, Shirley. Jennifer truly adored Edward. Though their meetings were infrequent, it was evident from her actions how much she valued Edward. Perhaps that's why she preferred to keep some distance from the in-laws' house. Jennifer and her family lived about an hour's drive from our home, having bought an apartment there. However, even after marriage, Edward remained very caring towards us, his parents. He once bought a refrigerator for my birthday as a present. Not only that, but for our wedding anniversary, he would take us, his family of 3, on vacations. He was a child with strong family values, by any standard. But it's not like we spoiled him without limits. Of course, we praised him when he did well and scolded him for doing what he shouldn't or when he behaved badly. Even after marriage, we told him not to go out of his way for us and to prioritize Jennifer and their family. However, Edward always said, "Jennifer is very understanding. She always supports me," and never changed his ways. But Jennifer seemed to harbor some dissatisfaction towards Edward. In moments when it was just the two of us women, she would indirectly speak ill of us, as if she harbored hostility. There were no direct actions like breaking things, but I feared something might happen if we spent too much time together. Edward was a good kid but not the best at sensing things. Jennifer seemed to take advantage of that, acting as a gentle and kind woman in front of Edward. Between the two of them, they seemed to manage well enough. Honestly, I had some reservations about moving in with them due to these circumstances. Living alone can be tough, right? Jennifer and Shirley are both on board with you moving in. Having my granddaughter Shirley around meant I wouldn't be alone with Jennifer as much. Plus, it was unlikely she would do anything in front of Edward. Shirley was cheerful and more like Edward in personality. She was fond of me, too. Holding on to a sliver of hope, I nodded in agreement. "All right. I'll be careful not to be a bother. Please let me live with you." "You're more than welcome." We'll get your room ready. Since I wasn't giving up my own home, I only had to pack the essentials. Thus, I moved in with Edward and his family, keeping only the most important things at my house. My faint hope was quickly shattered. After moving in, I experienced harassment from Jennifer, especially when Edward wasn't around. She would open parcels I ordered online, eat the ice cream I bought without permission. And sometimes my laundry was the only batch not washed. Carol can do it herself since she's capable. Please buy your detergent, too. If I used the dryer, I'd be scolded for wasting electricity. Reluctantly, I started separating my laundry into a different basket. Yet Edward noticed nothing. Instead, he thought I was voluntarily taking on household chores. This was likely because he spent little time at home and left all the housework to Jennifer. Jennifer actively takes care of Shirley in front of Edward, so life goes on to some extent. However, this life felt suffocating for me. I debated countless times whether to report this to Edward or leave the house. But I thought all it took was for me to endure. I didn't come here to break up a family with a daughter. Instead of talking to Edward, I kept a diary of my unspoken frustrations. As potential evidence for anything that might happen, detailing everything meticulously. Using a voice recorder would have made for stronger evidence. But I didn't want to escalate things, so I refrained. It was frustrating, but I was living under their roof. I was determined to endure until things settled down. That was until I saw Jennifer harassing Shirley. I caught her throwing Shirley's stuffed animal into the trash. It didn't seem like discipline or teaching a lesson. Edward has always adored children, especially his daughter Shirley, to the point of spoiling her. He regularly bought her the things she wanted, including the stuffed animal she just had thrown away. As far as I could tell, Shirley hadn't done anything wrong to deserve that. "Shirley, did something happen?" So I asked her. "It's always like this." "Always?" "Nothing happens when Dad is here. But when he's gone, she becomes like a demon, scary." "That bad?" "Sometimes there's no food, and she tore the clothes Dad bought because Shirley is a bad girl." It seemed Jennifer was jealous of Shirley too. It was obvious to me how much Edward cared for Jennifer. The engagement and wedding rings were from a high-end brand Jennifer wanted, costing a total of $10,000. He never missed giving presents for birthdays or anniversaries. Yet, Jennifer felt she wasn't his #1 priority. In front of Edward, she was a good mother, but without him, she acted like a tyrant. "With Dad, Mom buys me anything and is kind." "I'm scared of getting scolded by Mom, so please keep this a secret." Shirley is in 2nd grade this year. A young child bearing this alone. Why didn't I notice sooner? Enduring it alone wasn't the solution. I regret focusing solely on my issues. The day I witnessed the harassment, Edward came home past 11 p.m. due to overtime. I resolved to talk to him the next day. But he had to leave on an emergency business trip. With a significant issue at hand, there was no time to talk. While Edward was away, Jennifer invited friends over daily. Birds of a feather flocked together. Her friends didn't find her behavior odd. Jennifer did as she pleased, hosting parties at home. During this time, not only was I neglected, but Shirley wasn't even provided meals. The harassment towards me escalated. I needed to find a way to consult Edward over the phone. But Jennifer sensed my intentions. "Don't report to Edward. It would be troublesome if my position were jeopardized further." Jennifer took both my mobile phone and Shirley's. I couldn't retrieve them without knowing where they were hidden. Although there's a phone in my own house, I didn't know Edward's cell number. Moreover, with Jennifer often home, we were under constant surveillance. Escaping was difficult, and running away alone would be futile. I had to find a way to rescue Shirley too. I was starting to panic. Jennifer's neglect had become evident. I was cooking for Shirley with groceries I bought with my own money. I took care of all the laundry, walked her to and from lessons, and handled everything from taking out the trash to cleaning. Despite this, Jennifer continued to host parties every day, and if I missed even a day of cleanup, the house would start to smell, affecting Shirley, who has a chronic respiratory condition and needs regular visits to a major hospital for blood tests, X-rays, and other exams, which I accompany her to. "Grandma, are you overdoing it?" "It's okay, I'll protect you, Shirley. I hope Dad comes back soon." Seeing Shirley tear up made me realize the urgency of resolving our situation. It had only been 2 months since I moved in. I had quit my part-time job due to the move and wasn't part of any community groups like senior clubs. With my mobile phone taken, I had no means of communication. I had no one to directly consult with. I wasn't even informed how long Edward would be on his business trip. It was the beginning of days filled with despair. 2 months into this life, in February, possibly due to global warming, the year experienced extreme temperature fluctuations. Mental stress likely played a role, but both Shirley and I had been feeling unwell. Sometimes Shirley would skip school. "School is better than home," she insisted. Then came a day with snowfall said to occur once every 10 years. The day before, I felt unwell as usual and woke up with a fever of 102.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Shirley seemed to have caught a fever too, struggling even to get up. We had no antipyretic pain relievers at home. It could be a seasonal epidemic. I had heard that using over-the-counter fever reducers could be risky in such cases. Somehow, we needed to get to a pediatrician or an internist. Jennifer had been aware of our ill health but had done nothing. There was no sign she would help this time either. The nearest hospital was about a 10-minute walk. Though Shirley was in 2nd grade, she was taller than her peers. At over 60, I've never been injured, but physically, it was demanding. If only I weren't feverish. Reality remained unchanged despite my wishes. I managed to get Jennifer to call a taxi company. But due to the heavy snow, all were out. And with uncertain wait times, they couldn't dispatch one. How could I get Shirley to the hospital? I had no choice but to rely on Jennifer. After much deliberation, I reached that conclusion. "Please, can you drive us to the hospital?" I pleaded with Jennifer. She seemed to ponder before responding. "All right, but asking me for a favor means you'll need to provide something in return, right?" she said, implying I had to pay her as if she were a taxi. If it meant getting Shirley the care she needed, I had no choice but to agree. "It's not much, but will this do?" I handed Jennifer all I had, $100. She visibly grimaced at the amount, presumably expecting more. It's no surprise the amount was small. I had quit my part-time job. Despite this, I was covering the expenses for Shirley that Jennifer wasn't paying. The $100 was a significant amount for me, but it couldn't be helped. Jennifer, with a look of dissatisfaction, securely placed the $100 in her wallet. "Well, all right. Hurry up and get ready." Her reluctance was evident, but it seemed she would drive us after all. Unsure when Jennifer might change her mind, I quickly prepared Shirley, who was barely able to stand, and we got into the car. Because of the rush, I was still in my pajamas. Jennifer just looked at her mobile phone while we were getting ready. We set off amidst the heavy snow that blurred our vision. Jennifer's irritated driving came to an abrupt halt halfway to the hospital. "What happened? Did the car break down?" I just remembered I have a spa appointment today. Walk the rest of the way to the hospital. Come on, get out quickly. If you won't get out by yourself, I'll make you get out. Shirley, delirious with fever, and I, confused. Couldn't understand what Jennifer was saying and couldn't get up from the car. Apparently displeased by our inability to move, Jennifer came around to the back seat and literally dragged us out of the car. Now, the nuisances are gone. Good luck making it to the hospital. Laughing loudly, Jennifer drove away. Mom, did she really just abandon us? Even in such a moment, Shirley still regarded her as her mother. With tears in her eyes and a feverish gaze, she watched the car drive away. Shirley, let's go to the hospital first. We'll deal with Mom later. My words might not have been very convincing, given I hadn't managed to do anything so far. But that was all I could offer at that moment. The guilt and helplessness I felt towards Shirley nearly made me cry, but I was desperate to hold back the tears. Supporting each other, we managed to reach the hospital. Mom. Even while receiving treatment, Shirley mentioned Jennifer. Why must my young granddaughter endure such hardship? My patience had reached its limit. Fortunately, it was the hospital Shirley regularly visited, and they agreed to admit her. Hospital life was more restful than being at home. I realized then how tense I had been. Having recovered a bit both mentally and physically, we were cleared to leave the hospital. It had been 3 days since we were at home. Jennifer's surprised face greeted us upon our return. Seriously? You're alive? I thought, what a way to speak, as I shielded Shirley behind me. Yes, we were properly treated at the hospital. The worst. I kicked you out because I didn't want this place to become a crime scene. It would have been better if you had just disappeared. Jennifer was scolding us with a look of disdain. Her face turned pale the next moment, thinking she was alone in facing us. Jennifer, what are you saying? The person who came from behind us was Edward. Edward, why are you here? Back during our hospital stay, I had made a phone call to a certain person. It was Edward. Since Shirley's hospital had Edward's mobile number as an emergency contact, I asked the hospital to let me call him to report our hospitalization. Being a blood relative allowed the call to go through. Jennifer had been in regular contact with Edward. However, she had not conveyed our health issues. She claimed to be handling all the household chores herself. It's cold recently, you both should rest well. Can Jennifer take over for you? Jennifer isn't here. Why? Has she left already? We were supposed to be brought by Jennifer, but she left us on the road. I reported to Edward everything Jennifer had done to us, including the harassment towards Shirley, and the neglect since Edward left. I can't believe Jennifer would do such a thing, but if you say so, it must be true. I'll hurry back, so please wait a little longer. Initially, Edward was in denial. My flurry of words made him realize the seriousness of the situation. However, he wanted to see the evidence with his own eyes. I implored him to see for himself and requested he take leave. As promised, Edward managed to finish his work early and came home temporarily. Jennifer, explain everything. Was what you just said truly what you think? No, it was just a joke, obviously. Mom, let's stop this. Shirley, who had been watching us argue, spoke up. She began to recount the mistreatment she had suffered from Jennifer, choking up with tears at times, with the severity of the actions being too much for an elementary school student. I can't believe it. I didn't think she was that kind of person. It's not true. Shirley, stop lying. Edward, usually gentle, had a tense expression. He rushed to console Shirley, who continued to cry. Despite Jennifer's continued denials, I pulled out the diary. Here's the evidence. This is all written by Carol, right? It's fabricated. In fact, I'm the one being harassed. Please believe me, Edward. Jennifer clung to Edward's arm, crying. Edward, ignoring Jennifer, started reading my diary. There's more evidence here. Come in, please. I regretted not buying a voice recorder. There was no turning back now. I realized I needed to present irrefutable evidence or Jennifer might manipulate the situation to her advantage. In a move that felt partly like a gamble, I believed there would be physical evidence and let Edward into the house. My hunch was correct. It appeared Jennifer had hosted a party at our home the previous day. The living room was cluttered with empty alcohol containers and uneaten fast food, creating a slight odor, especially since we had been away for 3 days. So, everything Mom has been saying is true. I just hadn't gotten around to cleaning up yet. Jennifer, we need to divorce. I'll take care of Shirley. Edward, cutting off Jennifer's excuses to suggest divorce, seemed to show he wasn't willing to entertain her justifications any longer. Jennifer, faced with the idea of divorce, couldn't accept it, breaking down like a child, incapable of coherent discussion. Right there, Edward called Jennifer's parents to explain the situation over speakerphone, allowing us to hear their reactions. After initial shock, Jennifer's parents sighed deeply and ended the call with continuous apologies to us. Jennifer didn't calm down enough to talk properly after that, only repeating apologies to Edward without once explaining herself to me. It was clear staying there wouldn't change anything. Excluding Jennifer, the 3 of us decided to begin a new life in my standalone home. Edward, still somewhat attached, tried to engage Jennifer in conversation several times afterwards. However, she only ever responded with denials. It's not true. I'm not at fault. This infuriated me once more, reminding me of a child's denial. She wasn't inherently bad. I had hoped if she changed her behavior, we might have a chance again. But it never came to that. The absence of any change led Edward to decide on divorce. Communication became impossible, so they proceeded with lawyers to finalize it. Shirley initially showed some resistance to the divorce. It's sad for Mom. I think Dad should be with her, despite enduring so much mistreatment herself. Probably, Jennifer's good mother facade in Edward's presence was hard for Shirley to forget. A small act of kindness left a lasting impression. Perhaps, in some ways, Jennifer was pitiable, her life having drastically altered since meeting Edward. Shirley's words allowed me to feel pity for Jennifer for the first time, aside from my anger. However, Edward and I always shower Shirley with the same love. Being with us, where she doesn't have to fear people's faces, must be more comforting for her. Gradually getting used to life in the detached house and feeling secure away from her mother, Shirley began to resolve to distance herself from Jennifer. We were in a position to demand child support and damages, but it seemed Edward couldn't bring himself to do it. Moreover, as Jennifer had been a housewife, she had no savings or income. Thus, we did not pursue any financial claims, and the divorce proceeded without them. Jennifer's parents, having been contacted by Edward, flew in from their rural home, which is quite far from where we live, so it took them some time to arrive. After the divorce was finalized, Jennifer was taken in by her parents, who came to our place to apologize in person for the trouble caused. They even offered me cash as compensation for the inconvenience, particularly towards me. According to Jennifer's parents, She had become mentally unwell after separating from Edward. She had a history of getting deeply involved in her romantic relationships since her student days, sometimes causing trouble or distress to her partners. Each breakup left her deeply depressed, sometimes confining herself at home. She had become somewhat more stable mentally as she began to lead a fulfilling life outside of her personal affairs. But then she met and fell in love with Edward. Edward's kind nature, always trying not to make her feel insecure, was comforting for her. However, she disliked his kindness towards others. All these factors combined led to the current situation. Her parents have since helped her start psychiatric treatment. But recovery seems slow, with Jennifer mostly staying in her room. Hospitalization was considered, but for now, she is being closely monitored at home. At the doctor's suggestion, all of Edward's contact information has been deleted. And he has done the same, so there's no longer any contact between them. I declined to accept the inconvenience money, asking for it to be put towards Jennifer's treatment instead. Edward seems unaware of Jennifer's current situation. We, the parents, debated whether to inform him but decided against it, thinking neither Edward nor Shirley would want to revisit those memories. Especially Shirley, who might think, if only I hadn't been there. The scars Jennifer inflicted during her childhood are too significant. We've decided to keep it among ourselves. Life with Edward and Shirley has begun, and not once have I felt like a burden. I feel sorry that Shirley had to transfer schools. But she insists it doesn't bother her. Edward tries to finish work early and come home. I haven't resumed part-time work, but joined a local seniors exercise club, realizing the importance of community engagement through this ordeal. This has also allowed me to get to know our neighbors. Now, I live modestly happy days with my beloved son and granddaughter. As soon as Thomas saw me, he pleaded, "Please, take care of me." Why should I do that? I blurted out reflexively. Who does he think he is asking this? When I was hospitalized with a broken bone. It's a no from me. Ask someone else. And who was it who said that? It's your own responsibility. Be grateful you even got help. This is the end of me reaching out to Thomas. I am Elizabeth, 32 years old. Married 5 years ago, with my husband Thomas, our son Anthony, and our dog Max. We're a family of 3 and 1 pet. Thomas works at a major IT company and is very busy every day. Leaving home early in the morning and often not returning until the date changes isn't uncommon. He frequently works on weekends and takes business trips once a month. Thanks to that, Thomas rarely spends time with the family and has almost no memories of playing with Anthony. However, he has risen rapidly in his career, attaining a managerial position in his 30s. We were able to build my dream house because Thomas worked so hard. My parents are farmers in a rural area. That's why I always longed for a suburban house with a yard. Thanks to Thomas, Anthony and I live comfortably. I've come to terms with our limited family time. To outsiders, we might seem like a blessed family. However, due to my husband's frequent absence, I handle all the childcare and housework alone. It's basically single parenting. I wanted to work and send Anthony to daycare, but Thomas insisted on a preschool that also teaches. So Anthony goes to preschool and I ended up as a housewife. But I have a reassuring friend. My childhood friend Madison. We're the same age and from the same countryside. By coincidence, our kids attend the same preschool. Madison has been a single mother since her divorce last year. After dropping Anthony at preschool, having coffee at my place is my only break. We share our gripes about Thomas and the hardships of parenting. It's when I'm talking to Madison that I realize something. Unknowingly, I've been harboring dissatisfaction towards Thomas. People always say it's wrong to feel dissatisfied in my situation, and I thought so too. But maybe, I was just convincing myself not to be discontent. One day, while walking Max, he suddenly ran off. I chased after Max desperately. A car had stopped in front of me, and while Max managed to avoid it, I wasn't able to stop and ended up hitting the car. It was entirely my fault. Max looked at me worriedly from the sidewalk. I was relieved he was safe, but I couldn't stand up. I was taken to the hospital by ambulance, diagnosed with a bruised shoulder and fractures in my ankle and fibula, and admitted immediately. It seems I'll be hospitalized for about 3 months. I wondered what would happen with Anthony's care. And the house. The worries seemed endless. I called Thomas's mobile phone. I thought he would cooperate at a time like this, but he was continuously unavailable. As I grew anxious, Madison called me. It was to discuss costumes for the preschool play, but I cut the conversation short and asked her to take care of Anthony. Madison was initially surprised and concerned for me, but hearing that I sounded stronger than expected, she gladly agreed to look after Anthony. I was so grateful I almost cried. Next, I phoned Mom to briefly inform her of the accident and my weeks-long hospital stay. She said she'd come as soon as she finished her tasks. Until Mom arrives, Madison would be the only one to rely on. After hanging up with Mom, Thomas finally called. "Sorry, I was too busy to answer the phone." I reported the accident to Thomas and asked him to bring some clothes and essentials. But his response was unbelievable. "No way. Why should I do that? I have to get up early tomorrow, ask someone else." I had expected Thomas to be incredibly worried, but I was the one shocked. Not just because he refused to bring my things, but because he showed no concern at all. I had hoped for Thomas to worry about me and our family. Was I too naive to expect kind words from Thomas? The next day, Madison came to the hospital. She brought my change of clothes and other necessities from home. Madison has a key to my house. And I have one to hers. We always agreed to help each other out in emergencies. I brought extra towels. Let me know if you need anything else. Madison's thoughtfulness made me feel so grateful. After Thomas's behavior yesterday, her kindness was a relief. I couldn't help but tear up. Madison said with a laugh, "You're overreacting," lending me a handkerchief. Madison is the complete opposite of me, calm, good at reading the atmosphere, and empathetic. I've never seen her in a fight. She's nothing like me, who wants to get a qualification and work outside. "Are you okay from the injury? Take better care of yourself." Madison's ever-gentle tone comforted me. "Don't worry about Anthony. He stayed at my place last night and slept with my kids." Without me saying anything, Madison understands. "Why is Thomas so indifferent to us? I get he's busy, but he doesn't even visit you in the hospital and hasn't seen Anthony, right?" While Madison visited, I vented my frustrations about Thomas. Seeing me sighing and lamenting, Madison smiled kindly. "Men are like that sometimes. He's probably under stress we don't know about at work." "Maybe, but not showing his face or concern, that's going too far. Thomas works late, he's not just out having fun, right?" "That's true. We have a comfortable life and our own home because of Thomas. He does earn enough for us." I felt somewhat convinced by Madison's words. "Let me know if you need anything. I can make time to come see you." Talking to Madison lightened my mood a bit. I'll have a proper talk with Thomas once I'm discharged from the hospital. Right now, I just wanted to see Anthony. Mom came from the countryside to help, and after 3 weeks, I was finally home. Mom dropped me off and left immediately due to responsibilities back home. My house felt so nostalgic after 3 weeks. Max greeted me. He barked at my crutches as if they were the enemy. I sat on the sofa and looked around. Nothing had changed. Home really is comforting. Max kept barking at me, even as I relaxed on the sofa. "There are no crutches now." "What's wrong?" Max dove into my bag and pulled out a handkerchief. The one I meant to return to Madison. I had put it in my bag to wash it at home. Max grabbed the hem of my pants and started pulling. He seemed to want to take me somewhere. I managed to get up and followed Max with my crutches. He walked excitedly. Max stopped in front of our bedroom, stood up, and opened the door with his claws. "Why the bedroom?" "Max, what's going on?" Without hesitation, Max dived under the bed and pulled something out with his mouth. It looked like a beautifully patterned cloth. Max dropped it in front of me. It looked familiar. I spread it out and realized it was a scarf. I remembered seeing it weeks ago. Yes, Madison wore it when she visited me in the hospital. But why is Madison's scarf here? I shuddered at an unpleasant thought. No, that can't be right. Madison is my childhood friend, my best friend, and she's kind. I shook my head to dismiss these scary thoughts. Then, Max climbed onto the bed and started pulling at the sheets. I felt as if the blood had drained from my body. If Max was right, it would mean Madison had slept in our bed. Madison's gentle smile flashed in my mind. It must be an overthinking. I talked to Max that no such thing have happened. Madison couldn't have slept here, right? Max gently licked my face. In the afternoon, Anthony came home. Seeing me, he hugged me tightly. Indeed, Anthony is my sunshine. I felt brighter and warmer. I tentatively asked him, "Where did you sleep while I was in the hospital?" "In my room, with Madison and her kids at our place. It was fun." "What does that mean?" I thought Anthony stayed at Madison's house. Didn't Madison say so? My suspicions only grew. Where did Madison sleep then? I bravely asked Anthony where Madison slept. "I don't know. But she and Dad were talking in the living room late, probably drinking too." "I don't know. But she and Dad were talking in the living room late, probably drinking too." I left Anthony and went back to the bedroom. Standing there alone. The thought was overwhelming. Thomas and Madison in this bed while my family and I were ignored. I couldn't believe it. Or rather, I didn't want to believe it. The bed was neatly made, no sign of any disturbance in the sheets or duvet. But could the smell not have been completely removed? And then there was the forgotten item. That Max had noticed it. Since discovering this suspicion, I couldn't sleep in that bed. I started sleeping with Anthony. He was happy, not suspecting anything. Thomas had become a repulsive presence. With so many thoughts swirling in my head, there were many days I couldn't sleep. Where did we go wrong as a couple? When my leg cast was removed, Thomas left the house in a strangely good mood. I had a bad feeling. While waiting for the preschool bus, Madison arrived. She was unusually stylish. Her makeup a bit more flamboyant. "Good morning. You look so stylish today. Got a date?" I asked casually, trying not to show my suspicions. Madison smiled unabashedly. "I've met someone I really like," she said. It was clear now. No proof, but Madison was doing something despicable. She liked the one person she shouldn't. I struggled to hide my trembling, angry hands. After parting with a happy Madison, I returned home, stunned. I couldn't let Thomas and Madison continue like this. It had to end. When I was able to move freely, I decided to visit my parents. That night, I told Thomas about going to my parents' house next week with Anthony and invited him. "I won't go. Got work." "You two go ahead." I knew Thomas wouldn't come. But his smile bothered me. He asked when I was leaving and returning. No interest in me, but he cared about when I'd be absent. I said I'd leave on Wednesday and return Sunday night. "Got it. So you're returning Sunday night." Thomas pulled out his mobile phone and started entering something in his schedule. I could tell why he was so keen on confirming our return date. I didn't miss the smirk on Thomas's face as he fiddled with his phone. The 5 days at my parents' house were wonderful. Anthony was extremely interested in farming, spending every day in the fields with Dad, enjoying playing in the dirt. On our way home, "I had fun. I want to come back." Anthony kept saying. Thinking about the confrontation awaiting at home, I felt heavy-hearted. After I returned from my parents', Thomas suddenly announced he was going on a week-long business trip. Previously, his trips were at most 2 nights long. A week seemed suspiciously long. Seeing my puzzled face. Got a lot of clients to visit. Might even land a big contract. Thomas started talking about work, something he usually doesn't do. It sounded like he was trying to cover up guilt. Yet, he was in a great mood while packing, humming tunes. It looked more like preparing for a vacation than a business trip. Thomas left early in the morning. Even unusually saying, "I'm off." And he left. I heard the engine sound outside. He wouldn't use the car for a business trip. Feeling something was off, I stepped outside and saw our car parked in the garage. Back inside, I casually looked at the shoe rack and noticed Thomas's hiking shoes were missing. You don't pair hiking shoes with a suit. Checking the closet, his outdoor jacket was gone too. What kind of business trip was this? But still, Thomas being away for a week was a fact. I was relieved not seeing him. By then, I had no romantic feelings left for Thomas. A few days later, while cleaning the house after dropping Anthony at preschool, I received a call from an unknown number on my mobile phone. I answered with caution. It was from a hospital near my parents' house, located in the mountains. Shocked by the call, I rushed to the hospital. After picking up Anthony from preschool, we hurried to my parents'. I explained briefly to Anthony in the car. Thomas had gotten lost while camping, slipped, and fell down a ravine. He was alive but suffered from multiple bruises and a severe open fracture in his leg. Luckily, he was rescued by local firefighters. It could have been life-threatening if not for the rescue. Initially, Anthony joked, "That's just like Mom." But when I told him about the severity, he became serious and worried. I left Anthony with my parents and headed to the hospital. Indeed, Thomas's business trip was a lie. I knew it, but still, I couldn't contain my anger. I felt too kind for bringing his clothes and other belongings. I also brought an important envelope with me. At the hospital, I learned Thomas was in intensive care. While waiting in the lobby, I heard painful screams. It seemed to be Thomas's voice. I was worried, but also thought it was divine punishment. After a while, a nurse guided me to the ICU. There, Thomas was crying and screaming in pain and fear. His neck was immobilized, and his body was wrapped in bandages. Anthony, seeing him, would probably exclaim, "He looks like a mummy," making a big fuss. He was in such a pitiful state. As soon as Thomas saw me, he pleaded, "Please, take care of me." "Why should I?" I blurted out reflexively. Who does he think he is to ask this? When I broke my bone and was hospitalized. It's a no from me. Ask someone else. And who was it who said that? Then, the curtain of the next bed opened. And I screamed. There was Madison. Indeed, they had gone camping together. Madison was injured too. Not just her arms and legs, but her face and head were wrapped in bandages. Her eyes were terribly bruised. She couldn't move freely. Thomas, with his face immobilized and in pain, hadn't noticed the curtain open. He vented his frustration and pain at me. "Do you even understand my pain? Don't just stand there, start taking care of me." Thomas had fallen from a high place to the bottom of a valley. Of course, it would hurt. He was lucky to be alive. "Like I could understand your pain," I snapped back at Thomas. My patience had reached its limit. Thomas lied about a business trip to go camping with Madison, got into an accident, caused trouble for everyone. And now he's making a scene about being cared for. It's your own responsibility. Be grateful you even got help. I was done extending my hand to Thomas. Our marital relationship was already over. Today, here it all ends. Madison is here too, so it's perfect. Time to settle things. I decided to corner Thomas. I didn't care about his pain anymore. Justice was on my side. Do they call camping a business trip at your company? Or were there clients at the campsite? I didn't relent. I kept pressing Thomas. Do you need to go to remote mountains for IT work and risk getting lost? Thomas glared at me through tears, enduring the pain. Shut up. It's none of your business. You went back to your parents' house, didn't you? Don't lecture me. What an audacious claim. I had honestly said I was going to my parents'. But Thomas had lied. I didn't lie. Did you have a reason to lie? Thomas just glared, unable to retort. I turned my back on the silent Thomas and looked down at Madison. Did you follow Thomas and fall too? Madison, grimacing in pain, spoke. Yes, I was trying to help Thomas and we both slipped and fell. So, your fun camping trip turned into a disaster. I snorted. It's not what you think, Elizabeth. It's a misunderstanding. Madison retorted in a small, pained voice. What misunderstanding? It all seemed to be the truth. I insisted on going camping with Thomas. I know this area well. There are hidden spots there. Madison was defending Thomas. Maybe she felt like a victim. Please, don't blame him. Thomas did nothing wrong. Madison was sobbing. The more she spoke, the less truthful it sounded, yet she continued. I didn't mean to hurt you, and I never expected it to turn into this. I'm really sorry. Madison seemed intoxicated by her own tears. Her words felt insincere. I should be the one crying. Thomas, noticing Madison's voice, interrupted our conversation. I just accompanied Madison for her hobby. I couldn't refuse your best friend's invitation. Thomas seemed determined not to admit any infidelity. So, the business trip was a lie, then? Thomas began to get flustered. Victim-playing Madison continued to defend Thomas. Both of you, stop it. This disgraceful affair will only bring more trouble if it continues. It seemed I would be the one to bring retribution upon Thomas and Madison. I was done with Madison's melodramatic charade. I took out an envelope from my bag, which I had brought from home. I spread out the photos from the envelope over Thomas and Madison's bed. Thomas and Madison were speechless, their eyes wide. The photos showed Thomas and Madison entering a hotel arm in arm, and entering my house, hands intertwined. I had hired a detective when Max found Madison's scarf in our bed. They had been meeting not only during my visit to my parents, but also at other times. Thomas turned red with anger. How dare you do this? Spying and sneaking around. We just had dinner together while you were hospitalized. I almost laughed at Thomas's transparent overreaction. Meanwhile, Madison was still in tears. She covered her face with her hands, but I could see her peeking through the gaps. Maybe Madison was even worse. Thomas's tirade continued. This is fake. You must have fabricated it. He weakly swatted the photos away. You won't admit it, huh? I didn't want to use this, but... I sighed and pulled out an IC recorder from my bag. I placed this under the bed in our bedroom. Thomas and Madison swallowed hard. Sweat trickled down from the gaps in Thomas's bandages. I took my time looking at both of them, then pressed the play button. Don't tease me. I can't wait any longer. I pressed stop and turned to Madison. Do you want to hear the rest? Madison, losing her expression, shook her head side to side. It seemed she was beyond pretending to cry. There's plenty more. You spoke quite ill of me. Stop it. I'm sorry, just stop. My husband muttered softly. I asked Madison how long they had been involved. I was jealous of you. I failed at marriage, yet you lived in such a nice house, living luxuriously. And you were always complaining about Thomas. So, I thought I'd take him for myself. It all started from Madison's jealousy. She envied others. If I had Thomas, I could have a life like that too. What's wrong with that? Madison was defiant, playing the victim. While listening to us, Thomas tried to snatch the IC recorder from me. Careful! Moving suddenly caused him intense pain. He lost his balance and fell from the bed. Thomas didn't make a sound. It seemed like he had fainted. Madison, shocked, looked at Thomas. I pressed the nurse call button. Nurses arrived quickly, and I was ushered out of the ICU. Once in the hallway, I realized my legs were shaking. I had been strong in confrontation, but I was really scared. During Thomas's hospitalization, I started divorce proceedings. With plenty of evidence of his infidelity, the lawyer said the divorce could be favorable for me. I would demand alimony and child support from Thomas. But that alone wasn't enough to punish Thomas. A thorough division of property was necessary. I sold the house, liquidating it into cash, divided the savings, and split stocks and investments. Thomas's parents came to apologize sincerely. They would oversee the alimony and child support payments. I promised Anthony could visit his grandparents occasionally. I filed a claim for alimony against Madison too. She would repay it little by little. Madison suffered an after effect to one leg from the accident. She couldn't walk without a cane. Thomas's condition was worse. He was close to needing a lower limb amputation. He became wheelchair-bound. The affair, disguised as a business trip, led to severe reprimands at work. He was demoted as a disciplinary action. Though he could have been dismissed, his past performance was considered. No one in the office sympathized with Thomas. He faced cold stares. Having lost the house, Thomas drained his savings on alimony and child support, now living in an old apartment. Without barrier-free access, he struggled with daily life. Recently, Thomas's dad reported to me. Thomas and Madison had broken up. For Madison, a wheelchair-bound Thomas was no longer desirable. Thomas and Madison never imagined things would turn out like this. They must be haunted by regret now, wishing they had refrained from lying and stepping over the line. But it's too late for regrets. Nothing can undo the past. Anthony and I decided to move back to my parents' house and live with them. With my parents around and Anthony starting at daycare, I found time for myself and got a job at a local real estate company. I'm vigorously studying to obtain several real estate qualifications. Anthony, loving the increased opportunities to be in nature, seems to be thoroughly enjoying life here. Every morning, before the sun rises, he goes to the fields with Dad to care for the crops. Anthony loves watching Dad operate the tiller. He must think of him as a hero. After helping in the fields, Anthony heads to daycare, plays to his heart's content, and returns home. Living in the countryside has made him sturdier and more sun-kissed compared to our urban life. It seems being surrounded by nature is better for Anthony. My parents are happy and smiling all day, enjoying the lively atmosphere. Max, the hero of this whole situation, seems to love it here too. He used to be reluctant to go for walks, but now he eagerly awaits them every morning. He loves being in the fields with Anthony and Dad, playing and getting muddy. Recently, during a family picnic by the river, Anthony suddenly stood up. "When I grow up, I want to be like Grandpa." Dad, with a big smile, patted Anthony's head. Mom watched Anthony with joy in her eyes. "Impossible! William, that can't be done." "Switch the medicine with that." I only heard a whisper, but it was unmistakably William's voice. "I'm sorry, Linda. Actually." The next day, Mary confessed something to me. I was shocked and at the same time, resolved. I must protect Mary at all costs. "And William, I will never forgive you. My name is Linda. A 55-year-old housewife. Recently, my only son John got married, and I felt at ease. My husband William and I are the same age. Guess we need to start thinking about our retirement, huh?" We would laugh about it. John used to live alone in an apartment about a 5-minute drive from our house. It was a studio apartment. So, after getting married, the newlyweds moved to a bigger apartment. Their new place was even closer to us, just a 10-minute walk away. William and I thought, it's comforting to have John so close. But I felt a bit uneasy. Being so close to the house means we need to be careful not to overstep boundaries. I was warned by a friend before. At this age, most of my friends have become mother-in-laws just like me. And from them, I got various pieces of advice. The most shocking was about sons' wives. People have two sides. Just because she smiles in front of you doesn't mean she's happy. My friend said in a serious voice. In essence, don't be fooled by the superficial smiles of sons' wives. No one wants to doubt the smiling face of their son's wife. But my friend's words were convincing. In fact, this friend got along well with her daughter-in-law, meeting up frequently. She was like a real daughter to me, she'd often say. However, it turned out the daughter-in-law had been forcing herself to accommodate herself to her mother-in-law. One day, her pent-up frustrations exploded, and she got angry. They almost broke off their relationship, but somehow they managed to calm things down. At the end of the day, we're strangers. A proper distance is crucial. I remember the tired sigh and the lonely look on my friend's face. Mary, who married John, is a really nice girl. Always smiling and great at listening to others. Truly adorable. I wondered how such a nice girl ended up marrying John. When I visited the apartment, Mary greeted me with a smile. Furthermore, feel free to visit anytime, she said. I want to believe there's no lie in her words or smile. But taking everything she says at face value and imposing could be dangerous. To get along with a son's wife, such caution is necessary. By being cautious, we maintained a good relationship. We meet only when invited by the couple. We also refrain from contacting them unless necessary. It feels a bit lonely, but thanks to this, we've been able to get along without any issues. However, one day, when my son and his wife came to visit, they made a surprising request. Excuse me? What did you say? I asked again, and John repeated the same words. That's right, I've been assigned to work overseas, so we want Mary to stay here with you. John had been on business trips abroad before. But this was his first long-term assignment. Upon asking, it turns out the duration is at least 2 years. And it might extend beyond that. 2 years? Is it okay for a couple to be apart for so long? Wouldn't it be better for Mary to go with you? Mary has her job, and I'll be busy abroad. It's safer for her to live with you guys than alone in a foreign country. John looked to Mary for consent, and Mary nodded with a smile. Really? We don't mind, but if we can support our son and his wife, that would be wonderful. But, is this really what Mary wants? Living with us, the in-laws, might be less comfortable for her than following John abroad. If Mary's parents were around, maybe she could have relied on them, but both of Mary's parents have passed away. But why can't she just live on her own? The apartment is close, and of course, we'd be happy to help if anything happens. There's no need to live together unnecessarily. Thinking it would be better for Mary, I suggested this to the couple. But, for some reason, that won't work, Mary immediately said. Mary has some bad memories from the past, and she can't live alone. Mary nodded. Is that so? I'm sorry for not knowing. No, it's fine. Then, living together might be the only option. At that moment, William, who had been silently observing, said, if that's the case, she should stay with us. There's no need to hesitate. Mary is our daughter now. William smiled at the couple. Besides, he added, I often come home late from work. It'd be better for Linda to have Mary around than to be alone. True, William doesn't start work early, but he often comes home late. It's reassuring not to be alone at such times. Yes, if Mary is okay with it, let's live together happily. Indeed, there are benefits to living together. Not only drawbacks. And unlike me, a housewife, Mary has a job. We won't always be together. Maybe we could make it work. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. Us too. And so, Mary began living with us. I was nervous about living together, but Mary was indeed a good person. Linda, good morning. Would you like to join me for breakfast? When I woke up, there were delicious-looking scrambled eggs, sausages, and soup on the table. Oh, thank you. I'm so happy to have someone cook for me, it's never happened before. But, it must have been a lot of work. No, I was making some for myself anyway. I hope it's good. Let's eat. Yes, it's delicious. I'm glad. Mary has a job, so I did most of the housework. But Mary never dumped everything on me. Instead, she actively helped with the chores. John really has an eye for people. Marrying someone as wonderful as Mary, he's a lucky guy. I looked to William for confirmation. Indeed. And he smiled. Living together seemed problem-free. However, about a month into our living together, I noticed a change in Mary. She still did housework between her job duties but started to stay in her room unusually often. After meals, she'd head straight to her room and not come out until morning. Even in the morning, she used to have breakfast with us, but now she'd leave for work before we even woke up. Did I do something to make her dislike me? It's lonely. I told this to William, who returned home late. Are you thinking too much? Mary might just want some alone time. That may be true, but I feel like she's avoiding us. Living together with us. Mary has to be considerate of us every day. Maybe she's tired of it. As I pondered, William patted my shoulder. Don't be too anxious. It's bad for your health. Don't fall sick again. I had previously been hospitalized for a stroke. Remembering that, William looked worried and stroked my back. I'm fine. I'm taking my medication properly. But maybe I am overthinking it. After that, Mary avoided me even more, but I tried not to mind it. Weekdays were okay, but weekends were hard. On weekends, William would go out alone. So, I often went out with Mary. Even if we didn't go out, we chatted at home while eating snacks and spending time together. But recently, Mary would refuse even if I invited her. Moreover, she started going out every weekend. Are you going out now? I casually asked Mary as she was heading to the entrance. Mary looked puzzled and said, "This has nothing to do with you. Please leave me alone." Then Mary hurried out of the house. I understood she was rejecting me. Having been close at first, I was more shocked than I imagined. Since then, I've also started avoiding Mary somehow. Will things stay this way until John returns from abroad? Maybe it would be better for both of us to stop living together now. I wanted to talk to William, but, as luck would have it, he was not around. William had been away on a business trip for 2 weeks. The weekends were painful for me, so I tried to go out as much as possible. I didn't want to run into Mary. When I got home, I could hear Mary's voice coming from her room. It sounded like she was talking to someone. Since Mary wouldn't invite guests over without telling me, she must be on the phone. I'm home. I called out and approached her room. As I was about to quietly open the door, I realized Mary was on a call. She was indeed on the phone. Convinced, I thought not to disturb her call and was about to leave. When Mary raised her voice. It's impossible, William. I can't do that. I definitely heard William's name. William was supposed to be on a business trip. It seemed unlikely he would contact Mary from there. Yet, I heard Mary continue. William, that's why I can't. I heard Mary say. I approached Mary's room again, trying to listen. I could hear Mary's voice, but not the person on the other end. I couldn't tell if it was William nor understand the conversation. Feeling frustrated, I couldn't leave or interrupt. I just stood there. Meanwhile, Mary seemed troubled on the phone. Repeatedly saying, "That's why it's impossible." she said over and over. Was William asking her for something? Maybe I should help. But she'll find out I was eavesdropping. It might worsen our already strained relationship. Yet, it's sad to think our relationship could get any worse. As I was pondering this, Mary cried out in distress. Almost simultaneously, I heard something fall. Soon after, William's low voice filled the room. Switch the medicine with that. Perhaps Mary dropped her smartphone, causing it to switch to speaker mode. Mary must have quickly picked up the phone and switched it off speaker because William's voice disappeared, and only Mary's voice was audible again. After that, I understand, Mary said, then fell silent. She must have ended the call. I took a deep breath, quietly returned to the entrance. And after composing myself, I'm home. I called out to Mary again. Ah, welcome back. Mary came out of her room, her face tense. There was no way I could question her about the phone call. Mary went back to her room with a troubled look. Who was William talking about? Most of all, the words about switching the medication with that stayed in my mind. I thought about asking Mary several times, but didn't have the courage to do so. Had William and Mary been in contact without my knowledge all this time? William's tone during that moment was far from his usual demeanor. Such a commanding tone, not just towards Mary, but he wouldn't even use it with me. What if Mary was betraying me? Or, what if William was threatening Mary? I couldn't sleep that night. The next day, rubbing my sleepy eyes, I was drinking water in the kitchen when Mary woke up. Good morning, Mary. My voice was hoarse from lack of sleep. But Mary's voice sounded even less energetic. Good morning, she said, looking down, in a barely audible voice. Mary, you seem down. What's wrong? Could it be related to yesterday's phone call? Concerned, I looked at Mary and was shocked. Mary's eyes were swollen. Her cheeks were wet with tears, and tears were still overflowing from her eyes. Mary, what's wrong? Are you okay? Instinctively grabbing her hand, Mary grasped mine back. I'm sorry, Linda. Actually. Mary then explained something to me while crying. It was unbelievably shocking. I didn't know how to react after hearing everything. Stunned by Mary's sudden confession, my mind went blank. Mary cried in front of me again. I'm sorry. Linda, I'm sorry. Mary kept apologizing. I hugged Mary. What are you talking about? It's all William's fault, not yours. I tried to soothe her, but Mary's tears wouldn't stop. Hoping to calm her down, I gently stroked her back. I'm sorry, it's my fault for keeping silent. It's not your fault. Everyone has things they can't share. Besides, if John is okay with it, then neither William nor I should interfere in a couple's matters. Saying this out loud helped her cool down gradually. And then, anger towards William started to rise. How many years has it been since William and I got married? We've had our fights and even discussed separation. But, I had always intended to spend the rest of my life with William. Never did I imagine he would be plotting such things behind my back. After a while, when Mary seemed to have calmed down, we decided to discuss what to do next. First, we should contact John before William returns from his business trip. For Mary, she thought, I don't want to interfere with his work. But that's not right. He would consider you more important than his job. How would John feel if he found out you've been struggling like this? After hearing this, Mary silently agreed. We tried contacting John, but couldn't reach him. Maybe he was busy with work or asleep. We decided to leave a message summarizing the situation and asking him to call us when he has time. 2 days later, William returned from his business trip. I'm exhausted, he repeated, handing me his bag and jacket. I took them, saying, Welcome back, without really meaning it. Entering the living room, William looked around. What's wrong? I asked, and William replied. Just wondering where Mary is. scanning the room again. Oh, I sent her out for some shopping. Did you need her for something? I said with a forced smile, and William replied. No, not really. Averting his gaze. While William showered, I prepared the documents on the table. The thought of showing them to William filled me with mixed emotions. After decades of marriage, I never wanted to use such papers. But knowing the truth, I could no longer envision a future with him. William came out of the shower, looking satisfied, and sat down with a towel around his neck. Normally, he would finish off a beer already set out for him. But noticing the absence of beer, he squinted at me questioningly. Hey, where's the beer? There's no beer today. Look at this instead. I urged, and William, looking at the papers on the table, was shocked. What's this? He said angrily, staring at the table. I clenched my fist and said, These are divorce papers. Please, let's get divorced. Huh? William shifted his gaze from the divorce papers to me. Divorce? Why? I sensed more anger than confusion in William's voice and expression. Why does someone like me have to be told by you to divorce? I can almost hear him saying that. It seems like you wanted a divorce, right? William looked surprised. No, I never, that. I couldn't help but laugh. What's so funny? Because you're so flustered. Oh right, you didn't want a divorce, you wanted to remarry. William remained silent, looking troubled. I know everything. Your affair with another woman, trying to make me take medication to be with her, and what I can't forgive the most is that you threatened Mary. William turned pale and started to sweat. With that face. It's not true, that's not it. He kept repeating excuses. Whatever you say is pointless. I heard everything from Mary. Mary, that bastard. Mary had debts before getting married. It seems William found out when she was talking to John about it on the phone. The reason she couldn't live alone was because she wanted to use the rent money to repay the debt. Knowing she had no money, William must have thought he had the upper hand. He had Mary doing menial tasks behind my back. Mary, afraid of being thrown out, couldn't stand up to William. Apparently, Mary was keeping an eye on William every time she had a day off to break free from him. That's when she witnessed William cheating. When she confronted him. Linda will be the one who's sad. He brazenly responded. And then, brazenly, since it was out in the open, William ordered Mary to switch my medication. So, you thought of getting rid of me because I was in your way? Yes, shockingly, the person William was talking about over the phone was me. Having had a stroke before, there's a medication I must take daily. Without it, I'm prone to blood clots, and unluckily, it could be fatal. William was planning to swap my medication with something else. Of all things, to swap it with a vitamin pill, huh? For most people, it's just a supplement, but for me, it's poison. Depending on the type of vitamin, it could increase the risk of blood clots. In other words, William was after my life. Anyway, I can no longer stay with you. Please, let's get a divorce. We'll discuss the money for the divorce proceedings through a lawyer later. William looked frustrated and then turned his gaze to Mary, who returned. Mary, how dare you do this? You know what will happen, right? Mary showed a momentary look of fear, but when I took her hand, she glared back at William. I know. It's okay now. I have Linda. What? Getting cocky, aren't you? William seemed ready to pounce at any moment. But just then, there was a noise from the entrance, and John appeared. Are you okay? John stood in front of William, shielding Mary. John, why are you here? I got a call from Mom and rushed back from overseas. Dad, I'm disappointed. What have you done? At first, I just wanted to exploit a weakness and leave. But then, I needed money. Either way, it's despicable. I don't want to see your face anymore. Just leave. Wait. Are you okay with this, Linda? saying such things. You're a housewife without an income. You won't be able to live. Don't worry. I'll get the money for the divorce proceedings from you. Besides, this house was inherited from my parents, so don't act so high and mighty. William was still saying something so arrogant, but I'll call the police, I said, and he left. Afterward, William and I divorced. William had been secretly supporting his mistress, and some savings had been spent. I feel like I understand why he needed money. As a substitute for the money for the divorce proceedings, I took all his remaining savings. William's life from here on is on zero savings. Relationships broken off by his son, it's going to be quite hard. Whether his mistress will stick with him through this kind of life is questionable, but I couldn't care less. John went back to work the day after everything was settled. Mary and I are still living together. I repaid Mary's debts with the money I got from William. My son and his wife wanted to repay it themselves, but considering the interest rate, it seemed wasteful. Since it was William's money anyway, I wanted to use it up quickly. The regular meals between my son's wife and I are now my greatest joy. We want to keep getting along well until John returns home. I did what you could never do for Yosef. With those words, she showed off her newborn niece, Amelia, to me. Seeing me struggle for words, Yara wore a triumphant smile. Doesn't she look adorable, just like Yara? I bet she'll be a model or an actress someday. My betraying husband, Yosef, then added an insult to his remark. Time to head home, I guess. We've been able to show our happiness to the single Kayla over here, so it's been quite a satisfying today. Yosef exchanged a sly glance with Yara, both grinning deviously. What did they think of children? Were they just tools to flaunt in front of me, who couldn't have kids? Their attitude was pushing my anger to its limits. That's when I realized something. Wait, this child. What is it? You're looking serious, all of a sudden. Yosef responded, slightly caught off guard by my mutter. I couldn't help but find the situation amusing and began to chuckle. Gently stroking the baby's cheek, I replied. Such an angel, but her skin. As I revealed a certain truth, the smug looks on their faces froze instantly. My name is Kayla, 52 years old. My husband, Yosef, is an executive at a major trading company, whom I've supported as a housewife for many years. Yosef occasionally brings colleagues over to enjoy my cooking. Most of what comes out of Yosef's mouth are boasts about his younger days. His colleagues, brought along, would force a smile and endure his long stories, saying, "That's amazing." When they praise my cooking as delicious, Yosef smirks unpleasantly and says, "Well, that's about the only talent she has. She's eating off my high salary, so she better do at least this much, or she's just useless." And so he said, belittling me in front of his subordinates. I'd be lying if I said it didn't bother me, but I always reminded myself that I wasn't in a position to argue. It's been almost 30 years since we got married, but we've never had children. I always dreamed of having at least 2 kids after marriage. Despite spending time and money on fertility treatments, we were never blessed with children. I felt a sense of guilt for not being able to bear children. So, no matter how heartless Yosef's words were, I'd smile and think, I can endure this much. When Yosef talks about work, his eyes shine like a boy's, and I was happy to support him in any way I could. After all, I'm in love with Yosef. Apart from cooking, I had another talent. It was sewing, a hobby since my student days. I started making hand-sewn dolls, imitating my mother. They became quite popular among my friends. I used this skill to help with the household finances, making stuffed animals and charms. It might not be much compared to my husband's high salary. But I kept continuing with this small side job, hoping to at least treat Yosef to some nice meals. Our apartment becomes a weekend retreat for my niece Yara. Yara, my sister Megan's daughter, works in admin at a small trading company. She had a reason for her frequent visits. And that was to support a budding idol group. Did you see Trevor on TV the other day? He looked so cool. Yara arrived, fanning herself with a paper fan bearing a young man's face. Trevor, the man on the fan, is the leader of that idol group. They perform regularly at a club near our apartment every weekend, which is why Yara often stays over. Yara, your collection seems to have grown again, hasn't it? Each time Yara visited, her belongings in our room increased. I mean, come on. When new merchandise comes out, I just have to have it. Plus, Trevor is the most popular, so it sells out right away. I couldn't help but smile wryly at my niece's excitement before a performance. I understand the joy of buying your favorite idol's merchandise. I used to collect records of my favorite singers. But I wondered why she felt the need to bring all her new purchases to our house. Isn't it hard to carry all that around? It's fine. I'll just store my stuff here. Yara nonchalantly placed her bags in the corner of our bedroom. It's just me and my husband, so we don't have much space, you know. Ah, come on. It's fine. Uncle just comes home to sleep, right? Resigned, I had no choice but to accept my niece's whims. Oh, and I almost forgot. Mom made me bring this. With that, Yara pulled out a set of premium tea from her bag. My sister Megan and her husband occasionally sent gifts, and always made sure Yara brought something with her whenever she stayed over. Oh my, they didn't need to. After graduating high school, Megan worked far away until she was 30, then took over the family's variety store and married Kevin, an employee there. Since a large shopping center opened nearby, their business has suffered. So I always told her there's no need for such gifts. I'm sorry Yara's been such a bother. Megan would apologize over the phone, sounding guilty. However, Yara herself has become hard to ignore lately. She began entering our house even when we weren't home. It turns out Yosef has given her a spare key. She's here every week, might as well have one. Yosef had a soft spot for her. Uncle, you're the best. Yara would hug Yosef's arm, and he'd smile proudly. All right then. At first, I tried to be accommodating. But, 3 months later, a cash-filled envelope I kept in my bedroom drawer was missing. When I asked Yara, she nonchalantly replied, "Sorry, Aunt Kayla. I borrowed it. I really wanted Trevor's new merchandise." She looked at me with pleading eyes, but Yara has a job. She should be making enough to get by. Wouldn't buying it with your own money bring you more joy? Of course, I want to. But my salary isn't enough. Her casual words weighed on me. How much is she spending on this obsession? But it wasn't just about money. I noticed my skincare products were running out unusually fast. Since Yosef never used them, it had to be Yara. Confronted, she admitted it without hesitation. Sorry, Aunt Kayla. I just thought I'd use them since they were there. What did she mean since they were there? That cream was expensive. I frowned, and Yara pretended to shiver and rub her arms. Aunt Kayla, you're scary. Then Yosef would join in and laugh beside Yara. Come on, it's not a big deal. Don't laugh, you should be scolding her. Don't get mad. You look older when you frown like that. Yosef, usually not much of a joker, becomes chatty around Yara. I found particularly displeasing. Anyway, I don't want you using our things without permission. You have a job, so buy your own stuff. If you continue using mine, I won't let you stay over again. I'll make sure your mom knows that too. When I lectured Yara, Yosef turned red and shouted. Enough already. The things you use aren't even earned by you, are they? I'm the one who's worked for all of it. I'm not living in luxury. I've been cutting corners, managing with what we have. I'm not splurging on hobbies like Yara. It's my money, I earned it. If I say Yara can use it, then she can use it however she wants. Yosef's yelling made me want to cry. True, most of our income was from Yosef's work, so I couldn't argue further. Feeling abandoned with Yosef not on my side, I almost called Megan but stopped and put my phone away. Megan and her husband must be preoccupied with their struggling store. Complaining about my husband would just cause them unnecessary worry. Marital issues should be resolved between us. Days passed as I kept my concerns to myself. It was one cold Sunday morning during winter. A friend from my student days invited me out, so I decided to wear a fur coat I had never worn since purchase. I told Yosef about it beforehand. I plan to be back by evening, but if I'm late, could you start dinner? Just reheat yesterday's leftovers in the microwave. Don't worry about me. Take your time and enjoy yourself, he said, so smiling as he saw me off. Yosef, who usually belittles me in front of his subordinates, was kind and considerate when it was just us. I felt genuinely happy to be married to him. But as I arrived at the station, my friend called to cancel. Sorry. My husband's thrown out his back and can't move. I hate to do this, but can we reschedule? That's okay. Next time, you're treating me to fancy French cuisine. After jokingly dismissing my friend's repeated apologies over the phone, I wondered what to do, trying to come up with a plan for the day, but nothing particular came to mind. There's nothing else to do, I guess I'll go back home to Yosef. I stopped at the supermarket to pick up ingredients for lunch, thinking of making a warm stew for Yosef. As I opened the door, I was hit by a wave of heat and a scent of strong perfume. I noticed Yara's coat, a common sight on weekends. Yara, are you here? No answer. No one was in the living room. Strange, where could they be? I could sense someone was home, so they hadn't gone out. I stored the groceries and decided to look around the apartment. I could hear Yosef snoring from the bedroom. Was he taking a nap this early? I didn't understand much about Yosef's job, but being an executive must be tough during the week. So, I thought to let him rest on his rare day off. When I opened the bedroom door to see Yosef, I was met with a shocking sight. On our bed, usually shared by Yosef and me, lay Yosef and Yara, both naked and asleep. They were unaware of my return, lost in deep slumber. Yosef. I called out in a faint voice. More than anger, I felt a profound disappointment in my husband. After calling a few times, Yosef finally opened his heavy eyelids. Kayla? You're back early. He seemed groggy and closed his eyes again. Yara, I'm home. Yara, stretching and slowly sitting up, noticed me and shook Yosef to wake him up. Uncle, wake up. We got caught. She spoke with a mischievous grin, like a child found while playing hide and seek. Yosef sat up lazily, sighing, so, we're caught, huh, and yawned nonchalantly. What's the meaning of this? Confronted with this betrayal, I even forgot to express my anger. Well, as you see, we're involved, that's all. Both of you, get dressed right now. Surprisingly calm, I instructed the two. 2 hours later, my husband's parents and Megan's family arrived at my request. Sorry, Megan, Kevin, to bother you at this busy time. Don't worry about us. This is a serious matter. Megan comforted me, casting a cold glare at Yosef and Yara. What is the meaning of this? Explain yourself. She scolded at Yara, who only sighed and avoided eye contact. And to my surprise, she was checking the latest idol group updates on her phone. This is not the time for that. Megan scolded, snatching the phone away. Yara just clicked her tongue. Kayla, I'm so sorry for what our foolish son has done. Emily, my mother-in-law, tearfully apologized. Both in-laws were over 80, and it must have been hard for them to come in this cold. Do we really need to drag these old folks into this? Yosef complained. John, my father-in-law, slammed the table. Do you have no sense of responsibility? Yosef, after such a terrible betrayal to Kayla. You're unbelievable, Emily said in dismay. Yosef, how could this happen? Can you give me a satisfying explanation? No need to explain. Any man would prefer a young and cute girl like Yara over an old lady like her, right? As a man, I'm ashamed of you. John shouted at Yosef, who showed no remorse, his face turning red with anger. Yara is no better. How could you hurt Kayla, who's always been so kind to you? Where did we go wrong? Kevin, usually quiet, sighed in dismay. It wasn't Aunt Kayla who took care of me, it was Uncle Yosef. He buys me whatever I want. He even lets me use all the cosmetics and bags in this house. So different from Aunt Kayla, who's so petty. Yara, apologize to Kayla. No way. Why should I apologize to her? I don't need an apology. Even if you did, it wouldn't repair my relationship with Yosef. I spoke calmly. I reflected on the 30 years I had devoted to Yosef, enduring his belittling behavior because I believed he loved me. But his betrayal shattered everything I had held dear. Let's get a divorce. There's no other option. Is that what you want, Kayla? Megan asked, and I nodded firmly. Thanks, Kayla. Now we can marry openly, Yosef said, hugging Yara. They gazed at each other, unconcerned about the family's presence. On the way here, Dad and I decided, if you showed no remorse, we would disown you today. Megan said to Yara, her voice tinged with anger and sadness. That's fine. I don't need you guys anymore. I have Uncle Yosef now. Then it's decided. Don't ever cross our doorstep again, Kevin declared firmly. Yosef, we too have decided to disown you today. Megan's family and my in-laws apologized to me before leaving in a somber mood. Afterward, my divorce from Yosef was finalized. The divorce mediation, handled by lawyers, granted me compensation from both Yosef and Yara. Yosef, not wanting to burden Yara, paid both their shares in full. Within a month of our divorce, Yosef remarried Yara. I'm an executive at a major trading company. I can afford it. You can have all the marital assets, Yosef boasted, relinquishing his shared property. Despite his pride, he seemed to be struggling financially after paying both settlements. But he was a stranger to me now, so I focused on moving forward. I returned to my family home and began helping at Megan's variety store. Both my elderly parents were in a care facility. I took over the shop when Megan and her husband visited them. Sorry for always making you help out. It's me who should be grateful. I can't expect to be fed without doing anything. Megan and her husband always looked out for me after what I had gone through. Mostly out of concern for the mistake their daughter had made. Their feelings were so apparent that I felt more apologetic than they did. That summer, 3 years after I had returned home, Yosef and Yara unexpectedly appeared before me. Why are you here? I was stunned to see them smiling as they entered the shop. It's been a while, Aunt Kayla. Yara greeted, holding a newborn baby in her arms. Seeing the baby, I was at a loss for words. Since Yara was holding the child, it must be her baby. That would mean the father is, of course, Yosef. Seeing my speechlessness, Yara wore a triumphant smile. I did what you could never do for Yosef, she said, playing with the baby. She now called Yosef by his name, not uncle anymore. That reality shook me deeply. Then Megan and her husband returned. What are you doing here after all this time? Is that how you greet your daughter who's just returned home after 3 years? Yara retorted, showing off the baby. Look, Mom. Our child, Amelia. She's your first grandchild. Indeed. Congratulations. Megan replied emotionlessly, avoiding her daughter's gaze. Yara turned to me, smiling. I came to announce the birth of my daughter. Celebrate with us, Aunt Kayla. Say hello to Amelia. Enough. What on earth are you thinking? Have you considered Kayla's feelings? Kevin raised his voice, uncharacteristically angry. Doesn't she look adorable, just like Yara? I bet she'll be a model or an actress someday, Yosef said lazily. Megan, unable to bear it, grabbed a broom to chase them away. Leave now. This isn't your place. You're disrupting our business, so go away. Time to leave. We've boasted enough happiness to the lonely, single Kayla. It's a quite satisfying day today, Yosef said, exchanging a conniving smile with Yara. What did they think of children? Using a child as a tool to flaunt and bask in their superiority? As I sadly watched the baby in Yara's arms, I realized something. Wait, this child. What is it? You're looking serious, all of a sudden. Yosef asked, puzzled. I suddenly found the situation amusing and started to chuckle. What's with the sudden laughter? Something wrong? Looks like Aunt Kayla's gone crazy from the shock. Gently stroking the baby's cheek, I replied. Like an angel, but her skin. Her skin? What about it? It looks so healthy. A beautiful tan, unlike Yosef's fair skin. Indeed, the baby's skin was a stark contrast to Yosef's paleness. What's wrong with that? None of my family or relatives have such tan skin. Is that strange? There are people in the world with tan skin. Oh, Yara once mentioned her great-grandfather was tan. That's genetics, right? Yosef said, acting knowledgeable. At that moment, my suspicions about Yara turned into certainty. That's impossible. What do you mean, impossible? Yosef questioned, suddenly anxious. I fetched an old family album from a closet in the room my grandparents used to use. Here, something I want you to see. Saying this, I showed a photo from the album. It's just a regular family photo. In the photo were me, Megan, our parents, and grandparents. It was taken in front of the store when my parents first started their variety store. This tall man on the right is my grandfather, Yara's great-grandfather. So? It's just a normal family photo. Don't you see? Look at my grandfather's skin. Fair-skinned, so what? That's normal, right? Yosef seemed to not grasp the reality. While he was confused, Yara's face turned pale. Enough. Amelia needs her milk. Let's go. Yara urged, tugging at Yosef's shirt. Unaware of the truth, Yosef started to leave, so I gave him another hint. There's no one with tan skin in my family, not just my grandfather. No relatives either. Wait, does that mean? Finally, Yosef seemed to understand what I was implying. That means the likelihood of you two having a tan child is 0. I said emphatically. Yosef started shaking. It's a waste of time being here. Let's go home. Yara hurried him, but Yosef, now understanding, didn't move. He turned to Yara, questioning her sternly. What's this about? Our child shouldn't be tan. Then whose child is this? There's something else I want you to see. I snatched Trevor's keychain from Yara's bag and showed it to Yosef. Trevor, known for being half Hispanic and half American, publicly acknowledged his mixed heritage. Yara had always admired Trevor's mixed heritage, often praising his appearance as cool. This guy. He has the same skin color as Amelia. Yara, initially frightened, quickly turned defiant and laughed. Oops, looks like I got caught. That's right. Amelia isn't your child. She's mine and Trevor's. I seduced him, and he fell for me immediately. Yara boastfully recounted her affair with Trevor. You've been deceiving me? Seriously, did you think a young and cute girl like me would be into an old guy like you? Hilarious. I approached you because you're an executive and seemed wealthy. With your money, I could buy lots of Trevor's merch and win him over. So, I was just an ATM to you. Yosef realized the truth and erupted in anger. Of course. I endured it for the money. Who would willingly share a bed with an old man like you? I let you live in a dream for 3 years. You should thank me. What did you say? Megan, my husband, and I were stunned as Yara and Yosef argued. Enough, both of you. The baby is crying. Can't you hear her? Megan shouted, stopping their quarrel. I can't stand this anymore. You're not family, just strangers. Leave now. Megan ushered Yara and Yosef out. Poor Amelia. That was my honest thought. 2 months later, Yosef visited me alone. Suddenly bowing deeply, he shamelessly begged, "Please, Kayla, give me another chance. I did a DNA test. There's no blood relation between me and Amelia. I was deceived." Oh, really? And? I couldn't forgive Yara and Trevor for conspiring to make me raise their child. I stormed into Trevor's dressing room at a concert and demanded compensation. Oh my. How challenging for you. I humored him, though I was indifferent. I had already learned about the scandal from the TV and magazines. Trevor impregnated a married fan and let the husband raise the child as his own. This scandal became widely known, bringing national attention to the obscure idol group. Facing nationwide criticism, Trevor's agency couldn't defend him and ended his contract, as reported by tabloid TV. I saw it on TV. They're responsible for their actions. Right? They're terrible. Yosef laughed, thinking I was agreeing with him. Moreover, the tabloids, not easing their investigative efforts, ruthlessly delved into the life of Trevor's partner, Yara. Astonishingly, it was revealed that Yara had been physically involved with multiple men besides Trevor, earning money from them. Apparently, her goal was to financially support Trevor. You see? I'm just another victim deceived by them. So please, let's start over again. I decline. As Yosef tearfully begged, I replied emotionlessly. I called Kevin from the back of the store to escort Yosef out. If you keep bothering Kayla, we'll call the police. Kevin's firm warning sent Yosef away, dejected. A month passed. Though the media frenzy had subsided, reports about Trevor and Yara continued. Trevor, ousted from the group, was reportedly exploiting Yara for money. Yara started working at a nightclub to make ends meet. Raising a child was proving difficult for Yara and her strained finances. In the end, feeling sorry for Amelia, Megan and her husband decided to take her in and raise her. There's been a lot, but she's still our granddaughter. That's right. The child is innocent. The couple cared for Amelia while managing their store. As for me, I left home to fulfill my dream of opening a sewing class. I couldn't just keep relying on Megan and her husband forever. Megan told me I could stay as long as I wanted, but when I mentioned that I had things I wanted to do, she happily encouraged me to pursue them. Amelia's first birthday was approaching. What should I gift her? Partially to see Amelia and partially to visit Megan and her husband, I still occasionally stop by the family store. Kayla, you do realize you're a farmer, right? Please don't touch Samuel with those dirty, soil-stained hands. I hate even having to interact like this. No filthy poor people allowed. Please stay away from now on. I've never even had the chance to hold Samuel. Ever since we met, Naomi has treated me like an enemy, saying mean things and showing me a terrible attitude. Because of that, my heart has already reached its limit. Why is being a farmer something to be frowned upon? I'm just doing my job. I've resisted bending to Naomi's unreasonable behavior up until now, but even that has its limits. Yet, God hasn't abandoned me. My name is Kayla, a widow in my 50s. I live with my son Kenneth and his wife Naomi after my husband passed away. Our family has been farming for generations, and I've continued to work on the farm, inherited from my ancestors. Kenneth, already married, stayed to take over the farm. He's a hard worker and proactive in farming. But to be honest, things haven't been going well with Naomi. Naomi, can we talk? I want to check on the farm. Will you come with me? One day, I invited her with those words. There's a reason I spoke up like this. Marrying Kenneth essentially means taking over the farm. Kenneth understands this well and actively studies farming, but Naomi doesn't seem very enthusiastic about the work. I understand that farming might be seen as a tough and dirty job, especially by the younger generation. I thought the same when I was younger. But once you start, it can be unexpectedly rewarding. Naomi hasn't even set foot in the field yet, and at this rate, she might never discover that sense of fulfillment. So, I thought about going to the field with her to help her find that satisfaction. However, Naomi's response to my invitation was far from positive. To the field? Why? I hate the idea of going to such a dirty place. If you must go, please go alone, Kayla. I'll be relaxing in my room. Don't say that. This job isn't as dirty as you make it out to be. You might even find it enjoyable if you actually give it a try. A little visit wouldn't hurt, would it? It's not like that at all. I genuinely hate farming. Bugs come out, the vegetables are dirty. Isn't it awful to force someone to come to the field? Kayla, this is harassment, you know. Harassment, she said, and I couldn't help but let out a surprised huh. That was never my intention. It was meant to be a gesture of concern, hoping to slightly erase her aversion to farming. Yet Naomi continued. If you understand, then please never ask me to farm again. I didn't marry for your sake, you know. If you say something like this again, I might consider divorce. With that, she spat out her words and returned to her room. I thought about discussing this with Kenneth, but he's so positive about farming and works hard every day, I just couldn't bring myself to tell him. So, I decided not to report this incident with Naomi to him, and from then on, I aimed to live a life that didn't upset her, avoiding any confrontation. But even that didn't go well. In front of Kenneth, Naomi was very kind and dependable. However, the moment Kenneth was away, in the field or out shopping, Naomi would transform entirely. I have no intention of doing the housework, just so you know. If you want housework done, Kayla, do it yourself. I'm not a housekeeper. Kayla, wasn't today's dinner a bit too careless? It was so bad, I thought I would vomit. I managed to eat it, but when I think that Kenneth has been eating such food since he was little, I feel so sorry for him. Naomi's heartless words kept coming. Each time I faced them head-on, I felt my heart aching. Why do I have to be subjected to such unreasonable words? What have I done to deserve this? No matter how many times I asked myself, no answer came. And seeing me worn out, Naomi would laugh again. Kayla, you really aren't cut out to be a person. To think such a person is my mother-in-law, I can't help but worry about the future. I'm sure Kenneth doesn't rely on you much either. Elderly people like you should retire from work soon. Stop forcing the farm onto him. We have our own things we want to do. So, Kayla, please just disappear from our world. I'm sorry. The only words I could muster in response to her barrage were I'm sorry. I was so broken that I couldn't think of any words of defiance. Days like this continued, and I eventually developed insomnia. Yet, somehow, I kept pushing myself in my work. Naomi might think farming isn't a big deal, but knowing there are people waiting for the vegetables I grow, I couldn't afford to take a break. Mom, are you okay? You look a bit haggard. Watching me weaken day by day, Kenneth expressed his concern. But Kenneth only sees the good side of Naomi. He's unaware of the cruel words she hurls at me. I wonder what would happen if he found out. If Kenneth and Naomi were to divorce, would that be my fault? Am I stealing his happiness because of me? With those thoughts, I couldn't say anything more. I escaped his worries with some non-committal words like I'm fine, even though I'm really not. I really am a coward. Amidst all this, some good news arrived. Naomi was pregnant. Feeling unwell, Kenneth took her to the hospital, where they received the diagnosis. That day, the house was filled with a celebratory mood. Naomi seemed to be in a good mood too, not hurling her usual cruel words at me. I even thought it might be the first happy day I've had in a long time. I did my best to support her, ensuring she could have a healthy baby. I prepared meals with plenty of nutrients and fresh vegetables, and knowing that wouldn't suffice, I also made sure to serve delicious meat and fish dishes. She seemed to enjoy the meals, and that filled my heart. Maybe my extra kindness was also because I thought it's important not to stress her during her pregnancy. Eventually, she safely gave birth to a healthy baby boy. I was relieved that there were no health issues at birth. I couldn't visit right away because of my farm work. After some time, Naomi and my grandson returned home. The baby was named Samuel. I endeavored even more, keeping in mind that she now needed to raise Samuel healthily, without too much stress, and hopefully relying on me. But it seemed my efforts didn't reach her. One day, she summoned me. "Kayla, a moment." Wondering what it was about, I asked her, only to be met with unbelievable words. "Kayla, do you realize you're a farmer? Please don't touch Samuel with those dirty, soil-stained hands. I hate having to interact like this. No dirty, poor-like people allowed. Please stay away from now on." What? I was dumbfounded by her abrupt words. Seeing my reaction, she laughed even more. "All this time, I've been pretending to be part of the family, but it's all pointless." She mocked me. I wanted to be family. I thought we could support each other as a family. But it seems that was just a nuisance to her. Unforgivable. To dismiss all my feelings like this. What kind of person does that? Anger towards her welled up inside me, but even then, I didn't know how to respond. Understood. And that was all I could respond. I really am a coward. Even in such a situation, I couldn't muster a response to her words. Why am I so incapable? I thought about whether it was my fault, but more than that, I felt a strong sense of injustice towards her. And in those moments, God didn't abandon me. "Kenneth, there's something I need to talk about." At the dinner table that day, Naomi spoke up, sharing everything that had happened. She claimed she had been harassed by me, that she had endured it all this time, but just now I had gone as far as to tell her to leave. She was terrified about what might happen to Samuel if she continued to live with me. She wanted to move out to live just with Kenneth and Samuel, away from me. That was Naomi's claim. Of course, I had no recollection of harassing her. In fact, I felt I was the one being bullied. But my worn-out heart couldn't muster a proper defense. "Well, I can't imagine Mom harassing anyone, but if you feel that way, maybe we should consider moving out." Kenneth's words seemed to please Naomi greatly. After that, they decided to move out. However, they couldn't move too far since the family business needed to be continued, so their new home would still be near mine. Yet, just the thought of not having Naomi in the same house made me feel somewhat relieved. Realizing this made me feel awful again. We're a family, I wanted to live hand in hand. If there were misunderstandings, I wanted to work on understanding each other. But my heart was weaker than I thought. And so, they moved to their new home, and I was left to live alone in this big house. Kenneth continued to visit often, but I started to feel the loneliness. The incident happened the day after they moved out. After finishing the day's work, I came home and, having some free time, checked my mobile phone to find numerous missed calls. All from Naomi. Wondering what it could be, but feeling a surge of aversion towards her, I decided to ignore the calls. There were also several texts seemingly asking me to pick up the phone, but I ignored those too. What could she possibly want now? There's nothing I need to talk to her about anymore. I had a bad feeling, but in the end, I did nothing and left it at that. Then, that evening, the doorbell rang. Thinking it might be her, I checked, and sure enough, it was Naomi. "Naomi, what is it?" "I'm sorry, but could you please leave? I don't want to see your face." At my response, she looked as if she was about to cry. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked. Say anything? About what? I had no idea, so as I was thinking. "Why didn't you say anything, Kayla? You're not just a farmer, are you? You're also a landowner. I didn't know that. Why did you keep such an important thing a secret?" Her words left me speechless, a stunned "what" escaping my lips. Indeed, as she said, My family has been a line of farmers and, simultaneously, landowners. My family has been managing this area's lands for a very long time. Most homes around here are built on land protected and leased by my ancestors. As a result, the locals and real estate agents managing these properties can't go against me. Many respect me for owning so much land. However, I had deliberately chosen not to mention this to her. She looked down on me just for being a farmer, and I thought she wouldn't be interested in my status anyway. It seems she found out through a certain incident. Kenneth and Naomi had moved to a recently built apartment where she noticed that their rent differed from that of their new friends. Their rent was significantly cheaper. Puzzled, she consulted Kenneth. Then, "Isn't it because the land belongs to Mom?" he suggested. True to Kenneth's words, when they decided to move into this apartment, the real estate agent contacted me, offering to rent it out cheaply. I've been leasing lands to this real estate agency for a long time. Some since my parents' days, establishing an inseparable bond. Faced with this unknown fact, she was taken aback. Though aware I was a farmer, she had no idea about the landowning. This revelation apparently panicked her. "If you had told me, I wouldn't have behaved like that. I wouldn't have suggested moving out either. I would have definitely thought of getting along with Kayla. Why didn't you tell me? If you had, it wouldn't have come to this." "I thought you weren't interested in that kind of thing, Naomi." "Don't decide that for me. If I had known you were a landowner, none of this would have happened." In a panic at the doorstep, she grabbed her head and sat down. The commotion attracted the neighbors, their voices audible, making the situation embarrassingly uncomfortable for me. The moment she learned I was a landowner, she started blaming me like this. After demeaning me all this time, she now tries to take advantage of my position. Her opportunistic behavior was infuriating. And dealing with her in this moment felt like an incredibly troublesome time, prompting me to let out a heavy sigh. Then, she looked up in desperation and started apologizing profusely. "Kayla, I'm sorry for the horrible things I said. It was a shock to me too. The thought that I wasn't relying on you made me feel down. I don't remember when, but you once said families should support each other, right? I think that's a wonderful idea. So why don't we support each other now? I want to make a real effort with you, Kayla." Naomi said that. Her words felt sincere, but it was also clear that it was all for her own benefit. Her frantic attempts to keep me close are solely because of my status as a landowner. She, who showered me with cruel words for being a farmer, changed her tune once she learned I was also from a landowning family. Dissatisfied with her behavior, I coldly dismissed her desperate pleas. "No matter what you say, I no longer intend to join hands with you, Naomi. I remember every harsh word you threw at me. They haunt my dreams, and I still can't sleep well. Life became a bit more peaceful without you, and the thought of returning to that hellish existence disgusts me. Please, don't ever show your face to me again. I don't want to see you ever again." As I spoke, she hung her head, then pleaded even more desperately. "Does this mean you won't even hold Samuel? You might dislike me, but Samuel is your grandson. Won't you look after him? Isn't it heartless to ignore your own flesh and blood?" Unbelievable. I do feel sorry about Samuel. After all, none of this is his fault or Kenneth's, it's all her doing. But that's a separate issue. Once I've decided not to interact with her, it's inevitable that my involvement with Samuel will decrease. She, the very cause of this situation, still acts as if I'm the one at fault, which only adds to my disgust. Yet, she doesn't seem ready to leave. Seeing me fall silent, perhaps she grew desperate and threw more selfish words at me. Her expression was indeed one of utter desperation. "I understand that what I did is unforgivable. I've done things that should anger you, Kayla, and for that, I'm truly sorry. But please, don't abandon me. My heart has changed. I'm filled with a desire to make things right with you. Let's stop this sad separation. We're family, we should support each other, filling in where the other falls short." I'll properly engage in the farm work, I promise. So, please forgive me. Her eyes were bloodshot, clearly desperate to cling to our relationship. The old me might have been swayed by her plea, offering kind words and striving to work together as a family. But now, she is nothing but a destructive force in my life, not a cherished family member. No matter how much she pleads or professes her desire to live together, my mind is made up. I've already given up on her. I'm sorry, but continuing with you is impossible. Your words have hurt me deeply, time and again. I can't endure that life anymore. Being tossed around by you is beyond my limit. Sure, I feel sorry for Samuel and Kenneth, but my heart can't take it anymore. That's... Naomi murmured. Please, don't involve me anymore. And that means forever. I don't consider you part of my family. So, goodbye. The doorbell rang several more times, but after a while, perhaps noticing the neighbor's stares, she finally went home. I never imagined she would come to me like this. All because of my position. But I couldn't call such a person family. The incident spread around the neighborhood and eventually reached Kenneth, leading to a massive argument between him and Naomi. He learned of her behavior towards me, became furious, and even brought up divorce. She desperately tried to avoid it, but once it went to court, the matter was settled. He successfully gained custody of Samuel. It seems she often left the child rearing to him, which might have impacted Samuel's character if it had continued. So, I believe this outcome is for the best. After the verdict, she returned to her parents' home, but it appears Kenneth had informed them of her behavior towards me, and they eventually turned her away. Now, she's working part-time at a small company, barely making ends meet, and living in an old apartment. On the other hand, my life has also changed. Kenneth brought Samuel to my house. Now, Kenneth and I are supporting each other, jointly raising Samuel. After the incident, the neighbors expressed their concern, but I've regained my strength and am back to farming. Kenneth is serious about taking over the family business in the future. The whole ordeal with Naomi was a disaster for both of us, but I hope that one day he finds a partner with whom he can truly collaborate and support. Until then, I intend to protect the happiness of Kenneth and Samuel as a mother.
Next week, let's go to the vacation home and have a barbecue.
When Dad said that, our family was thrilled. The vacation home is an hour-and-a-half drive away. I always enjoyed the drive there, and going to the vacation home was always something to look forward to. People might think we're rich when I mention the vacation home, but my parents bought it during the so-called bubble era. I don't know much about it, but apparently back then it wasn't just the rich who bought vacation homes. It was common even among ordinary people. Dad, let's go fishing. Going fishing with Dad in the nearby river was a tradition when we went to the vacation home. Meanwhile, Mom and Melissa would play in the river or relax at the vacation home. This vacation home, which our family often visited, was filled with memories. I remember the time I drove my parents there as an adult. They were both moved. But then, Mom passed away from illness, and 3 years later, Dad followed her. They were a loving couple, so I think they must be living happily together in heaven. With that thought, I am riding my motorcycle to the vacation home after a long time. My name is Casey. I am a 30-year-old clerical worker. I love motorcycles, and since getting my license, I often go touring. It's definitely influenced by my father. People say it's a masculine hobby, but I like what I like. I am enjoying my life now and not actively looking for a boyfriend or husband. I hope to find a good partner eventually, but I'm not actively looking right now. Melissa, who is 6 years older, got married before Mom passed away and is now a mother of 2. We used to be close, but I don't get along with Lucas, so we hardly see each other. Lucas, 3 years older than Melissa, started a business and he often belittles me for being just a clerical worker in a small company. So I avoid him as much as possible. If you start a business, you're the president, whether you have 1 employee or 100. President is president. Whether it's pride or something else, I often hear him say, "I am the president." Well, it doesn't matter to me. But then, something happened that I couldn't ignore. It was about 6 months before my father passed away. His chronic illness worsened and he was hospitalized. Living close to my parents' house, I often visited and watched over my father. I was estranged from Melissa and her husband at the time, but I felt it would be unfair to my father not to tell Melissa if something happened, so I told her the situation. The hospital was about a 30-minute drive from Melissa's house. I thought she would come to visit, but she never did, saying it was too hard to bring the two kids. I never heard from my father that Melissa had come, so she probably didn't. Lucas is head over heels for Melissa, and he has spoiled and flattered her since they were dating. And Melissa has come to think that's normal and her attitude towards others has changed. In a word, she's lost her compassion. When she got married, I think she stopped thinking of us as family. "My new family is my family," she declared. Probably she found our parents who would scold her for being selfish annoying. Living a life spoiled by Lucas who would let her do anything, I didn't want to be involved with Melissa and her husband, and I have hardly been in touch with them since Melissa's wedding. Yet the moment I informed them of my father's death, Melissa and her husband started to cozy up to me. At the funeral, Melissa whispered in my ear, "Hey, how much is the inheritance?" What? Is this the place to talk about that? I couldn't believe my ears, but Melissa's eyes were serious. Lucas, sitting next to her, was looking at me too. "I'll sort it out later, so I don't know the details, but I don't think it's a significant amount." I had planned to pay for my father's hospital bills, but he insisted on using his savings, so we used what he had saved for the hospital expenses. Even after the funeral, I was busy greeting relatives and funeral home staff, but Melissa and her family were relaxing as if it were someone else's business. And as I passed by Melissa, she and her husband said, "Hey, can we go home now?" Sure enough, Melissa had changed. The old Melissa loved her father and would never have behaved this way at his funeral. She would have been sobbing, but this is how it is now. I became sad.
Hey, we can't leave until we have settled the inheritance,
Lucas said, laughing. I was angered by his words and raised my voice without thinking. "So we can't talk about the inheritance now? Please go home. Thank you for coming today." Those were not words to say to Melissa and her husband. I knew it, but I didn't want to think of them as family. The funeral ended and I slept for a night, but I was so sad about various things that I jumped on my motorcycle and ended up at the vacation home. What should I do with this vacation home? It's also part of the inheritance. I was troubled. Then Melissa called me. When I answered the phone, Melissa suddenly said something outrageous. "Hey, Casey, re-announce the inheritance." What? So that's how it is? When I fell silent, Melissa started talking on her own. "After all, Casey, you're single, so you don't need money, right? We have 2 children and we never have enough money. You wouldn't understand being single, but raising children costs a lot." Melissa started talking about her children whenever she could. During the New Year's celebration, she would show up at her parents' house where relatives gathered, saying it was troublesome to stay long with the children, only to take gift cards and sweets and leave. It was clear that she was after the gift cards. At some point, she became greedy for money and I began to dislike Melissa. And it's the same now that my father has passed away. Without mourning or thinking about my father, all she talks about is the inheritance. I was disappointed in Melissa. "Hey, are you listening? So renounce the inheritance." Even if you call it an inheritance, most of my father's savings were used for hospital bills, so it's just the house and the vacation home. Besides, before I could finish, Melissa cut me off. "All the more reason. If Casey renounces it, it will help us." There is no use talking to her anymore. "But what will you do with the family home and the vacation home? You won't live in them, Melissa. Will you go to the vacation home for fun?" "You know, my family home is in Atlanta and no one lives there anymore, so selling it could make some money. As for the vacation home, I wonder what to do with it." I really wish you wouldn't sell the vacation home. It's filled with family memories. "Casey, always talking about family. That's why you're not married yet." I was irritated by those words, but I somehow held back and continued. "But lately, vacation home seems to be in demand, so maybe it could sell for a high price. It even has hot springs, so there must be many people who want it.
Really? So if we sell that vacation home, we'll be rich?
I could picture Melissa's excited face. I thought for a moment and decided to renounce the inheritance, but with one condition. Hey, how about you prepare the memorial service, Melissa? And if you plan to sell the house, use that money for the preparation?
A memorial service? Oh, well, okay. So you'll renounce the inheritance then?
Melissa's voice brightened. I was hesitant, but as a single person, I rarely visit the vacation home. If so, it would be better for Melissa's family to use it, and if Melissa decided to sell it, I would be fine with others using that memorable vacation home. I paused before replying. Gladly. So I decided to renounce the inheritance and return to my usual life. A year passed since my father's death. Melissa, how's the memorial service preparation?
Casey, why are you contacting me now? Why are you angry? You've been ignoring my calls, Casey.
Huh? Misunderstanding? Oh, right. I changed my mobile number. I had changed my number since my father's funeral, wanting to cut ties with Melissa and her husband. Of course, I hadn't told Melissa, so she couldn't contact me. I just called to check on the progress of the memorial service. So, is the memorial service ready?
Huh? There's no way I could do it. I have 2 kids to take care of. You're single and free, Casey. You do it.
I sighed. You promised back then, didn't you? This isn't what we agreed on.
That's my line.
What? What do you mean?
You said the vacation home would sell high, so I thought I'd sell it right away, but it's not selling at all. Instead, I'm being charged thousands of dollars for maintenance and repair fees, and even for using the hot springs. What's going on?
Oh, that I found out about it later.
That's awful. It's a scam. A scam.
Why, Melissa? You're the one who wanted me to renounce the inheritance, right? I said it might sell high, but that was just an amateur opinion. I didn't know if it would actually sell, but the family home sold, right?
Oh, well, yes,
Melissa stammered. That means the family home must have sold for a decent amount. Then use that money for the vacation home expenses and keep it for family use. If I want to use it, can I pay a fee?
Well,
so Melissa, you really want to sell it? I asked Melissa the obvious question once more. How about renting out the vacation home then? You could set up tents in the yard for camping. Camping seems to be trendy, and you could keep the hot springs and turn the rest into a campground. Of course, I'm just an amateur, so maybe consult with a real estate agent? Melissa's voice brightened noticeably.
That's an idea. I hadn't thought of that.
By the way, I can arrange the memorial service if you will pay the cost as promised. If you don't pay, then transfer the rights to the vacation home to me. I don't really expect her to transfer the rights to me now, but I had to say it this way, or Melissa seemed likely to break her promise. Melissa, who thinks she found a use for the vacation home, obviously had no intention of giving it up. As expected, she nodded.
Well, I guess so. The vacation home seems to be working out, so I'll cover the costs.
Then I'll arrange it. Once the amount is settled, transfer the money to my account first.
Understood.
The memorial service went smoothly. Of course, I made sure to get the money in advance so there was no loss. After the memorial service, Melissa said,
I'm glad Dad left us the vacation home. Our dreams are expanding.
Lucas chimed in,
Our future is secure now. I'm grateful to father-in-law.
He never showed any gratitude before, but he says it now. I didn't want to be involved anymore, so I handled the conversation formally and left quickly. 3 months later, my mobile phone rang.
Casey, you lied again.
What now? What's the problem?
The vacation home.
Melissa was furious and kept talking.
You said to rent it out, but no one wants it. And when I asked about turning it into a campground, they said tents are prohibited on that land. Now I'm just losing money. What are you going to do about it?
Wow, that's tough. I didn't know that. I listened to Melissa's anger and nodded.
It's not just tough, it's your fault, Casey.
Why is it my fault? You were the one who got greedy and wanted to renounce the inheritance. If we had properly divided inheritance, I would have researched and considered selling or managing it, but it's yours, Melissa, so it's not my place to interfere. Since Melissa kept ranting about fraud and demanding I do something, I interrupted her. Besides, you have the money from selling the family home, right? It's not fair to take what you want and push off what's a burden.
That money's long gone.
What? I couldn't help but let out a stunned voice.
Lucas failed in his business. Now we are in debt.
The company of a man who always boasted about being a CEO and having business acumen went bankrupt? I couldn't help but laugh. That's really tough. I said the words, but I couldn't stop laughing.
Hey, what are you laughing at? We have 2 kids, you know.
Both of your kids are already in middle school, right? The older one is about to be a high school student. High school students can work part-time. And if the family pulls together, you can quickly handle that amount of debt. Well, if Melissa and Lucas can humble themselves and ask for help, that is.
What? Casey, you're single. You can't understand what it's like to have a family.
Sure. That was true until recently.
What?
Oh, I got married. My partner is a business trader.
A business trader? Casey, where did you find such a wealthy person?
Well, I think he earns more than our peers. He's a fellow motorcycle enthusiast. Melissa, you always told me to stop riding or I would miss my chance to marry, but I got married safely. I'll be a mother next year.
What?
So, just like Melissa, I'll be focusing on my new family. Please don't contact me anymore. Bye. I cheerfully hung up on the phone. I met my husband shortly after my father's death and we hit it off right away. I think my worried father might have guided me to my husband. After my father's memorial service, my husband and I had a small wedding and I soon discovered I was pregnant. I couldn't show my parents my wedding dress or their grandchild's face, but I'm sure they're watching from heaven. Dad, Mom, I'm very happy now.